Perfect. Thank you. There we go. Yep. Now ready to go. The hour is 12 o'clock and I call this meeting to order. Mr. Casey Griffin will call the roll to establish we have a quorum.
Mr. Cobbins, Mr. Gentile,
Here.
Mr. Jensen,
Here.
Ms. Cole,
Here.
Ms. Maxwell,
Here.
Ms. McInturf, Mr. Mullenhour, Mr. Rollins, Mr. Williams.
Present.
Mr. Chairman.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 voting members present.
I declare we have a quorum then. Without objection, Mr. Cobbins and Mr. Mullenhour is excused from the meeting. Any objection?
And Mr. Rollins.
Oh, and Mr. Rollins too. Yes, that's right. Yep. Okay. Pursuant to Section 8 of Policy 1.400, the board meetings policy workshops or meetings of the state board sitting as a committee of the whole. I ask unanimous consent that the state board dissolve itself into committee of the whole for the purposes of conducting our workshop. Is there any objection? If no objection, I declare then we are in the committee of the whole for the purposes of conducting our workshop. I want to remind presenters to identify themselves by giving their title and their position, and for the record while presenting. Also remind presenters to avoid using acronyms or jargon. These should be explained when used so that all Tennesseans who might be listening can readily understand the subjects being discussed, regardless of their individual background. With that, we'll move right into the agenda. Our first agenda is revisions to computer science standards. Mr. Brandon Smith, State Department of Education.
Thank you, sir. Try that again. Good afternoon, Chairman Eby, members of the board. My name is Brandon Smith. I'm the manager of computer science implementation with the Tennessee Department of Education, and I appreciate you taking the time to have me speak with you here today. Today, we're going to talk about computer science, which is something that's near and dear to my heart, and we're going to focus on a few specific things. We're going to discuss some big picture items around computer science education across the state and look back at our history and how we got to where we are today. We're going to talk through revisions that we've been making to our computer science K-12 standards. And we're also going to take a look at artificial intelligence. And I think you'll see that connection and why we're working those into this presentation once we get into the details a little bit more. So, in Tennessee, we have some pretty lofty and great goals for computer science education, and we've been paving the way for a number of years now. We recognize the transformative nature of technology on industry, but also our day-to-day life and education as a whole. We also are very cognizant of the additional disruptive nature of artificial intelligence and how that has swept through pretty much every aspect of life in the recent years and had some pretty dramatic changes that are important to recognize, not only within our work in computer science education, but within more broadly the education field. We also recognize that we are charged with making sure our students are prepared for the future that they're going to inherit. And we don't know what it's going to look like yet. So we want to make sure that we are presenting them with the knowledge and skills that we think will make them most adaptable and prepared to address those challenges of the future. So with our CS standards, we will be working to improve that digital and computer science literacy, along with preparing them for the eventualities of artificial intelligence. We also find that computer science aligns very closely to the 4 pillars that our department focuses on. Many students pursue computer science in a foundational nature, but also can go on to participate in computer science and digital technology programs of study, where they can earn industry credentials that can further open up opportunities in their career. For seamless transitions and individualized advising, it's important that students are becoming aware of the opportunities to them at an early age, and that's included within our standards. It's also important that our counselors and teachers are informed about what options their students may have so that they can teach to that and with that purpose. Finally, work-based learning. We have wonderful work-based learning program here in Tennessee. And I think it's a space we can actually grow a lot when it comes to computer science. We have great programs for manufacturing, automotive and agricultural, but I do want to see and would love to work on bolstering what it looks like to be involved in a tech field while you're still in your K-12 education space. So how do we get here today? How am I here in front of you? We had an initial K through 8 computer science standards that were released back in March 2018. Those were more focused on what you would probably think of as digital literacy, using technology in and out of the classroom. In 2022, there was unanimous passage of a bill that did a few things regarding computer science education. Number one, it was one of the first 10 states to require computer science credits as a graduation requirement. It also had a middle school requirement for students to complete one grading period. And also, and not common, pretty unique, we have an elementary integration requirement where we're asking our elementary teachers to pull in those CS standards and integrate within their content areas. A couple other pieces that I think are really important. Number one is our computer science endorsement pathway. It's the CCAP, and that is how we endorse in-service teachers and build confidence to prepare them to enter a CS classroom. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but I think it is core to all the work that we're doing to ensure that the teachers in our classroom are ready to deliver high-quality instruction. That began in August 2022, followed by the release of our current K-12 computer science standards. Districts began looking at and applying those standards in 2023, but they were not in full effect until the following year, 2024. That is when schools were required to begin meeting those requirements I mentioned before. It also indicates the first year a group of students came through that would be affected by that requirement. So 2024, that freshman class, they'll be the first group that will be graduating with that CS requirement on their transcript. Fast forward a little bit there. 2025 comes around, and at the department, we recognize a need to revise and update our computer science standards. One data point that's not on there is in the fall of 2022, ChatGPT became publicly available. We saw AI tools infiltrating their way not only into the tech field, but in the classroom and in schools. And so recognizing how quickly that developed and how quickly it was continuing to develop, we knew that we needed to also work to address that and prepare our students and teachers effectively. And that brings us to today, where we are, and we're looking ahead at 2028. We'll have that first group of students who graduate with the CS requirement. A couple of numbers to look at here. I talked about CSEP being central to computer science education as a whole. We know that our teachers are the key lever to making this happen. So far, we've had over 2,000 teachers who have completed our computer science endorsement pathway and earned that CS endorsement. Not only does it build their confidence and content knowledge to be able to effectively deliver instruction, but it also builds a network of teachers that are connected and understand and advocate for computer science in their schools, districts, and regions. And we found that network to be very beneficial in continuing to promote and encourage computer science across the state. A few more numbers here. Student participation, you can see, has jumped up quite a bit in the past few years. In this last year, we're up to 158,000 students across the state in grades 6 through 12 who are completing computer science coursework. And the number of schools has also increased dramatically within the last 4 years. Another data point that's not on this slide, but I think is relevant, is our CTE digital technology programming. The year one course, Computer Science Foundation, has also seen an increase in enrollment as schools are working to meet this requirement. So that's another relevant piece and data point to show that continued growth, not only in schools adapting, but students being exposed to the content. So as I mentioned here today, we are focused on computer science revisions to our standards. And I mentioned before that one date on the calendar that I didn't mention. ChatGPT, November 2022, came through and changed things pretty dramatically across all fields. We've seen technology fields have been affected maybe most directly, but those effects are felt rather broadly. If we look at the way a software engineer actually completes their work today, it's much different than it was 2, 4, 10 years ago. And it's important that we are cognizant of that as we continue to update our standards and improve what we want to put in front of students. A couple other data points here regarding cybersecurity. We're seeing that field expand dramatically. Not only has artificial intelligence made it easier to conduct cyber attacks, it's also a tool that those cybersecurity analysts are using to defend and work to combat those issues. Mentioned there, the last one, we've seen software engineers now, that data is also old. If we look at 2026 now, it's pretty common that any software engineer is going to be using AI first whenever they are creating a program. Now, they're still the expert and they still have to review, revise, and they have to have that systems thinking to get it to the finish line. But the tools have changed, and that's a big piece of what we're talking about today. In addition to that, state and national guidance has also evolved. The federal government has made AI a priority in a lot of different avenues. They have given some specific recommendations around education, and we feel like there are probably going to be more. There's been grant funding and other AI competitions for students, and so they're really making that a priority across this administration. The Tennessee AI Advisory Council has also included some recommendations for AI in education, and there's an AI education subcommittee that is also working on that specific scope of the work, and excited to hear more recommendations from them. Lastly, the Computer Science Teachers Association, CSTA, is the national organization that drives a lot of the work around computer science and the content and standards in the field. Those standards were last released in 2016, and they just released those updated standards this year. We'll talk a little bit about that more when we get into the standards revision process, but another big piece of that revision for them was artificial intelligence, as you would expect. And so we're following suit and trying to stay ahead of the curve on this. Other pieces we want to keep in mind is that schools are also trying to navigate this. And we have a unique position to influence and affect positively what they're doing in the classroom in regards to artificial intelligence. We're also in a different place in Tennessee where we're not focused so much on are they offering the classes, are the students enrolled? Now we can shift that focus to quality of instruction, and we can actually start to look at what is happening in the classroom and how is this benefiting students more directly. And again, we also want to make sure that we are preparing students for what their future may hold, whatever it may be. Increasingly, we see that that is going to include some aspect of artificial intelligence. There we go. I hope we didn't, did we skip a little bit there though? Okay, there we go. Good. Thank you. So as we were working through the standards revision process, there were a few specific documents we looked at. I mentioned the CSTA standards. They were not finalized at that point, but we did have access to a draft version. We also had some of our standards revision committee that were reviewers for those standards as well. So they have another lens to look at that. We referenced the K-12 computer science framework, which is also a guiding document with the creation of the original CS standards, and so we referenced that as well. That is more about big picture practices within computer science as opposed to specific knowledge and skills. And we also looked at other states that had already gone through this process of updating and revising their computer science standards to include artificial intelligence. We can see some of our neighbors here on the screen, but we also connected with them to get their insights on the process and what they found was important within this scope of work. Maybe it's just my finger, guys. Okay, there we go. So we mentioned that AI is integral to the work we've been doing here. We looked at a few other pieces regarding AI in education. We referenced the Tennessee AI Advisory Council's recommendation along with federal guidance, those executive orders and messages from the Department of Education that had been released at that time. We also looked at some other states and AI guidance that they had released specific to AI in K-12 education. And then lastly, the AI literacy framework is a larger document that was finalized earlier this year that also gives some guiding principles about how we think students should interact with AI and how it should inform their work. This is not a complete list, but this is some of the ones we keyed in on when we were going through the process of revising our standards. Last fall, we did an open call for educators to participate in our standards revising team, and we made an intentional choice to select members with a diverse experience and regional representation. We had some virtual meetings over the winter and met in person in Nashville in February. We had a full day where we get to really dive in to computer science. And if you have worked with teachers before. When they get to sit in a room with other teachers that know their content like they do, it is a fun time. Also, a very talkative time. And we had lots of ideas and lots of things that we wanted to do. But we were able to come to, we'll say, a stopping point at the end of that day with some clear goals about how we wanted to improve these standards and what we thought those revisions should really look like in the end. There was a lot of work beyond that, lots of individual and team meetings to get it to a further complete version. But that was that start date that really kicked it off, and I felt like it was a really powerful group that we pulled together. We also collaborated with the Tennessee STEM Innovation Network. They've been integral to computer science education from the get-go, and they're still strong partners in this field along with STEM education. We see a lot of overlap there, and we see a lot of teachers and schools that are including computer science within their STEM programming. Lastly, once we had come together as a group and got our standards to a place that we felt good about, we requested feedback from external stakeholders. That included members of higher education, K-12, and other nonprofit organizations. We also submitted them to be reviewed by the AI Working Group, which is a group of experienced educators who are knowledgeable of how AI is influencing the field that has been convened in collaboration with the State Board of Education and the Tennessee Department of Education. That is an ongoing group, and we're still working with them, but we appreciated their insights as well. Lastly, we took that feedback and used it to make some additional edits to the standards to get them to the place that you will see today. So I'm going to talk through the revised standards, and I'm going to intentionally try to avoid any jargon. I heard that comment, and I know it might be hard for me, but I'm going to work my best to get there. I want to first talk about some observations that that team made when we looked at the original current standards, what inspired some of the changes and revisions we wanted to make. So the first one is that our K-5 standards were organized by specific grade levels. So we had K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The observation we made, though, is that when you combine those together, there were 64 standards for all of K through 5 computer science education. When you combine middle school and high school, there were 62. And so we felt it put a bit of an undue burden on our elementary teachers that were having to add this on top of their regular day-to-day instruction. And so we're going to talk about what the changes we made to address that in a minute. Another observation we had was we have 6 core concepts that our computer science standards are organized into. One of them, networking the internet, from our observation, was trying to do too much, we will say. It seemed like it was catching anything related to the internet and didn't have a strong focus as to what content, what knowledge and skills should live there. And so we made an intentional effort to modify that as well. Another big thing, artificial intelligence was not addressed in the previous standards. It was not within there. It was not yet viewed or on the radar of what needed to be included. And so that was a big piece. And then lastly, we just made some tweaks. We saw where knowledge and skills were repeated or could have been improved regarding the clarity of language. And so we just improved, updated, and revised the language of those standards. So I mentioned the K-5. What we did was band them together for K-2 and 3 through 5. That reduced the number of standards and also provide some flexibility to both teachers and districts and how and when they want to introduce this content to students. For that networking and the internet core concept I mentioned before, we modified that and renamed it to systems and security. So it has a very clear focus now. It's focused on computing systems. That's the hardware and software that computers use to communicate and work effectively, and also cybersecurity and networking. We made sure that was a very clear focus. We ended up moving some of those pieces around the internet, internet safety and things like that to another core concept, impacts of computing, where it made more sense and was more cohesive and coherent overall. The next piece, AI, is explicitly addressed throughout these standards. You're going to see artificial intelligence included, but in addition to that, there are implicit inclusions of artificial intelligence, I would say. Foundational understandings and knowledge that students will need to have if they want to also understand how artificial intelligence works, which is key to this work. Lastly, we work to improve vertical alignment and reduce any of those redundancies so that teachers using these standards can clearly see the progression their students are making from one grade band to the next. So I have a few examples to go through to kind of showcase those modifications we made. The first one is an example from our K through 5 standards. So in the top, you can see 2 separate standards for third grade, and fourth grade. I'll break down that nomenclature really quick. The 3 is the grade level there at the beginning. FC is foundational concepts. That is one of our 6 core concepts, which is how we organize our standards. And 1 is just the number of the standard, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you look at those 2 standards and read them, there is a lot of overlap, I would say. And so this is an opportunity we found to condense into a single strand, a single standard in that 3 through 5 band. We also took the opportunity to add in some of those transferable skills that are really important within computer science. You can see also included now is collaborate with peers, a key skill for all students, but something we definitely emphasize within computer science education, and also communicating. We think it's really important that students are collaborating and also able to communicate effectively with their teams in order to create a working program or product. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. On the current standards, I see definitely the overlap in language between the first 2 standards. Was there a rationale on why these were listed this way in different places?
Originally?
Yeah,
I don't know that I had a rationale for that. That was before my time, and so I
Okay.
can't give
I
context
can't
for
think
that.
of one either, and so
Yeah.
it looks like a better just to clean up for
I-
that, so.
If I had to guess, and from what I've learned from people that did work on it, it might have been the way the teams were organized when they originally created the standards. They may not have been as much communication across
Okay.
those teams, which may have led to that division.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there another?
Yes, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is just, what is the meaning of improved vertical alignment? Because this is the meaning right here, or?
No, but I can definitely talk about that. That's a
Okay.
great question. So vertical alignment would be, let's say I'm teaching high school math, and I need my students to understand a concept about how to use variables or solve for a variable within a math equation. There might be a middle school standard where they actually are initially exposed to the idea of X as a variable that can represent different numbers. That vertical alignment between standards means that we can showcase in middle school, they learned what a variable was. Now in high school, they're learning how to use a variable. That would be a natural progression of learning that would lead to student success.
Okay, thank you very much.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah,
I'm
it
not
does.
sure.
It
Okay.
does actually.
Okay,
Thank you very
cool.
much.
No
I
problem.
yield.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another example of some of those changes. So this is a middle school standard. I'll again break down that nomenclature. IC is impacts of computing. You can look at that top one there and you can see that it is a little bit broad in its scope, but also you can see in the second example that we intentionally included artificial intelligence. When we're talking about data, when we're talking about privacy, when we're talking about how computers are using that information, we think it's necessary to include the discussion about artificial intelligence. This is just one example of how that is very explicitly included within our standards. There are lots of other examples, but that's one I've got here for you. And then lastly, one of our high school standards. So this is that transition from the networking and the internet core concept to systems and security. Again, if you look at that first one, I'll also break down application program interface. That is essentially how 2 separate computer programs might communicate with one another. So if you are using Facebook and it has to interface with YouTube in order to make your feed work correctly, there is an API working behind the scenes to allow those 2 to communicate. That is a protocol, but it is a very specific protocol, and in our estimation, wasn't necessarily something that needed to have its own unique standard. So you can see in this revised standard, not only have we renamed it to systems and security, but we've made it a little more broad. We've made it so that it addresses protocols, but it's not specifying an exact protocol. Now, you could call it vague, but I call it future-proofing here. We don't know what is going to come next. We don't know what technology or tools will be in use in the future. And so I do think it's important when we look at these standards that we have some variability to evolve to what does come next and give teachers that flexibility to teach what they think is most appropriate within the scope of that standard. So some of our intentions behind this, number one, we want to make sure our students are prepared for any and all opportunities that might come to them in the future. And we think by making these modifications will improve those outcomes for students. Secondly, we want to make sure that we are addressing AI very explicitly within our standards. We view this as a value add for schools as well. We know that schools and districts are working to determine how best to address artificial intelligence and provide opportunities for students to understand artificial intelligence. And so we think this is a super important addition. I also want to name that when we talk about artificial intelligence in the context of these standards, we're not saying have a student get on an AI tool. What we're talking about is how does it actually work? What are the fundamental pieces working behind the scenes that make artificial intelligence tools actually function? We think that's super important. And when it comes to dispelling ideas of humanizing AI, we think if you can have students look under the hood, it goes a long way in letting them understand what's actually happening and hopefully prevent any of those other misuses of the tool. Again, clarity and usability for teachers, strong vertical alignment was super key to how we looked at the language and the construction of these standards. And for elementary education, being aware of concerns around screen time, we want to make sure that schools were aware that it is okay to teach computer science without a computer. Okay, I've done it. As a computer science teacher at middle school and high school, I started every day on paper. And I firmly believe you can teach programming without even opening a screen. And I think it's important that we get that point across. There are instances where it's not as possible. I will admit that fully. But so many of the concepts, so much of the knowledge and skills that we teach within these standards does not have to be confined within a screen. It can be taught within a classroom, on paper, within discussions. And I think that's an important thing to hit home, especially for those elementary teachers that are looking to integrate these standards. So that is my overview of the computer science standards and some key examples of the revisions that we've made. I hope it gave you a glimpse of what we're trying to do with this revision. But I want to now also talk about AI in Tennessee schools. It was the hot topic, we'll say. It's also, again, important to the revisions that we made here. But AI is not just about CS. It does go beyond those classrooms. It is affecting all aspects of education, all content areas, and goes beyond that to affect higher ed, careers, and again, daily life. We think that it's super important to provide this additional opportunity for a foundational understanding of AI. Again, what's under the hood for students at an early age, so that when they do get older and start to experience and more had different exposures to those tools, they'll truly understand what it's doing and not be dispelled. It's not magic, it's math, right? So we want to make sure we get that across to students as well. We're also going to be working to revise our computer science endorsement pathway to align with these revised standards. Again, I think that's core and central to our work that we're doing, and we want to make sure that it continues to stay relevant and prepares teachers effectively for the classroom. Lastly, TCA 491236 requires that teachers complete an AI professional development by August of 2028. We're working on developing and creating that content so we can have that ready for teachers to receive that information and also be better prepared regardless of where they are. I feel confident my computer science teachers are very aware of this, but we want to make sure that all teachers are prepared to address whatever may arise in the classroom. So this is not, obviously, we have a team of people up here. This is never a one-man show. We are working to collaborate with our partners here at State Board to better determine what our best next steps will be. I mentioned the AI working group earlier. We convened a group of experts, educators from all different ranges with experiences in different fields that also are knowledgeable and interested in how AI is affecting that. We've convened once already this year. It was a great conversation, and we got some valuable insights from them along with those the feedback they gave to our CS standards. But we're going to continue to work with this group to help ensure we are moving in the right direction. Everyone has a different lens and experience that can help inform what we're doing. I want to make sure that we are collaborating along the way with this. So in those conversations, as I mentioned, we talked about some things we might like to do. I feel like there's a lot of different ways we could go and a lot of different directions we're being pulled. And so I want to make sure that we're getting our order of operations right here before we start taking big steps that will have big effects on schools and districts. Some of the things we're talking about, though, are AI guidance, policy templates that districts can use, some sort of AI literacy framework, whether that's one we create ourselves or one that we adopt and modify to the specific needs of Tennessee. We've also talked about a content standards crosswalk that would showcase how AI might be able to be implemented within a math or an ELA classroom. We've seen some other states that have created some work there that we really liked. We also talked about educator credentialing to not only provide them with the opportunity to get that professional learning, but then showcase that they have earned it and allow them to also hold on to that credential. And then lastly, making sure that our pre-service teachers are also being prepared effectively for what they're going to see when they enter a school district. We're going to continue to work on this. We're going to continue to collaborate. We're going to continue to pull in external partners that have, again, a lens and experience that we don't to better inform our work. But we're really excited about the next steps. We're really excited where Tennessee is at right now. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of organizations that are working towards similar goals. And so we think it's important that we continue to collaborate, to work together and make sure we're not leaving any gaps that would have negative outcomes for students, families, and districts. So next steps for CS. We've got the standards. We're pretty happy with where they are. I'm open to some other feedback. Every time I open them up, I'm always like, I wish I'd said that one thing a little bit differently. But our next step would be to provide some supporting guidance documents to go along with it. So our previous standards have an implementation guidebook, which provides standard explanation, examples of how it would exist in the classroom. And we're going to do the same with these standards. We're going to make an implementation guidebook that aligns to our revised standards. We're also going to offer professional development to make sure that schools are ready to implement these when they're required to, make sure that teachers are prepared and understand the why and rationale behind these standard changes, and build that investment across the state that's going to help it be more effective. I mentioned the CCAP already, updating that information to align, and that continued collaboration as well. All right, y'all.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd love to answer any questions you have.
Well, I have plenty of questions, but let some others ask. Mr. Jensen.
Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it. I've seen AI Advisory Council, AI Working Group, AI 2 or 3. Can you kind of give me some insight into the various groups? Just so, I mean, AI Working Group is particularly, it sounds like kind of the front line. I'd love to know that. And then who have you got from industry that's in that effort statewide?
Great question. Thank you. The Tennessee AI Advisory Council has a larger scope than education. They're convened to address the needs of all state governance in regards to artificial intelligence. So economic development, workforce development, education's included, but is not the only piece in that. I observe that group. I'm not involved in that, but I do keep a close eye on the work they're doing. The AI Working Group you asked about is actually, again, a convening brought together by State Board and Tennessee Department of Education. So I've been working with Michael Derlin and Brianna Summers, myself, to pull together this group and, again, pick their brains, get their ideas on what we should be doing and how we can do it best. I don't have the roster right here with me, but we do have a number of people, both higher ed, industry, nonprofit, K-12 involved in that group. When it comes to the CS standards themselves, I did put out a lot of feelers. Some people said yes, never responded, but we did have AI strategists from IBM who reviewed our computer science standards and gave some valuable feedback on what some edits we would make to make sure, again, we are future-proofing, we're preparing our students for what may come next and not pigeonholing ourselves in.
Follow up.
Sure, go ahead.
So from an industry perspective, I mean, what you're in is in floodwaters, and the current out in the middle of the river is about 40 miles an hour, and you can't even figure out where to go with it. So I guess my observation would be that we make sure that we've got industry people on there that are in the middle of it. I think about Oak Ridge. I think about St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. They're mapping the entire human genome and XAI. Google is across the river in Memphis now, or will be shortly. I just, FedEx, that's somebody that globally. So I just want to make sure that, because you're moving so fast in this, that you set a policy and 30 days later, it's antiquated. And so, and I don't know that there is an ability to get in that 40-mile-an-hour current and keep up with it. But at least I would like for us to think about that advisory council or whatever the working group, whatever the name was, to make sure we've got industry leadership that's in the middle of it now. I look at the advisory council, and it's a wonderful group, but there are not very many people on there that really have working knowledge of AI. I'm sure there's some. I don't want to offend anyone, and I know that's a bigger scope, but if we're going to think about our kids and what they need, and especially as we're training them for the workforce, that we have folks who can tell us this is where we are today, and hey, we're with you as you go forward. So thank you.
Thank you. I think it's very valuable feedback.
Let me ask you a question. How long have you been in this position?
A little over 2 years, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And a lot's happened in those 2 years.
You're not kidding.
Mr. Jensen, on the state board, I think, sort of urged, maybe lit a match for the state to get more involved in education and AI.
Mm.
I think we did play a key role in that.
Yeah.
And SCORE, the organization SCORE, has taken a real leadership role in that. In fact, they just had a council meeting not long ago, and our executive director chaired a panel on it. And I think it was very well attended. I don't know how many people ended up going to that. Yeah, 300 people or something. We also have been identifying other states. And with Ms. Knoll on the phone the other day, we had a conversation with the state of Maine and very impressed. We were at the NASB conference and we heard what Maine was doing in AI. And while Tennessee is active in education in AI, we're certainly not leading the nation in AI. And we need to continue moving this thing forward as rapidly as we can. And your comments about having industry involved, I think, are key. The AI Advisory Council that Mr. Smith talks about is an overall council that the governor has established for AI across the state. And there is an education subcommittee, and some of us, quote, are observers, although we do have our Sumner County superintendent is on that committee, I believe, isn't he? So, or is he an
Believe so.
observer also?
Dr. Langford?
Oh, that, yeah, Langford.
Dr. Langford is on that subcommittee.
Yeah,
yes.
that's what I thought. Yeah, right. And so we have feelers out there, but we need to continue to work this aggressively and actively as we can. A couple of questions. So how many schools are there in Tennessee?
I think I'm going to say 746, but I don't think that's right.
Oh,
Do you have a number
well-
in front of you?
Well, the reason I asked is you said there were, in 2026, there were 780 schools
Oh,
that were in AI, and I didn't know if is that 100% of schools, or is that?
oh, you mean the number of schools that are offering computer science courses? Is that the data point? I think.
Well, I'm just taking your data. You said there was 158,000 of our students that are doing some kind of coursework in AI.
Correct.
There's 1 million students in this state. I think 157 was in 6 through 12.
Correct. Correct.
So if I assume that's half of our students, there's 500,000 students roughly, and 158,000 are in AI, then that means, we're at less than 40%, or not AI, computer science,
Mhm.
Which AI is part of. So we're a long way from getting computer science. Here we're putting the standards in everything K through 12. So we've got a lot of work to do, obviously getting the teachers qualified to teach this. If we're only at 40% right now, and we will be passing these standards, then I assume since it's K through 12, we expect 100% of our students to be aware or taking computer science classes, right?
Yes, sir. That's the expectation.
So my question is, if we're only at 40% right now, how do we get our teachers trained? And how quickly can we have them trained so that 40% goes up to 100%?
It's an excellent question, Mr. Chairman. Right now, we have a capacity of 600 participants each semester. We're currently running it each fall and spring. I think communication is one piece. I also think that sometimes there's not teeth for some districts in regards to meeting that expectation. A follow through, we'll say, for what their needs are when it comes to making sure their teachers are involved. Now, I would prefer to encourage them to get there. So I think communication is a big part of that. And I think advocating for these standards is not only a way to improve computer science, but also, again, address those AI needs in schools. Will hopefully get schools and teachers more interested in engaging with this content and get districts more interested in offering those courses more widely.
So help me out. If we pass these as standards, it's what we expect our students to know, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So if we pass these as standards, we expect all of our students to be taught these standards. And if you're saying we're trying to get schools interested in having computer science in their schools, so what percent of our schools don't have computer science right now?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I definitely could find it for you.
Yes, good afternoon, Deborah Knoll, Assistant Commissioner. I just want to note also that that number is reflective that not every student every year has to be engaged in computer science. We've got our elementary students that it's already just embedded in everyday content. But for middle school, it's one grading period. So that experience may happen as a 5th grade student or a 6th grade student, 7th or 8th. It's really dependent on the school. So they have to engage in that one experience during middle school. And then the same thing for high school. It's that one course that they have to engage in. This was implemented to go in effect in 24, 25. And so again, the first graduating cohort doesn't happen until 28. So we're still scaffolding that. Not all students are engaged as of yet. Eventually, all students will be, but we're still in that scaffolding process. Because again, it's just that one course in high school, that one course in middle school. It's embedded throughout the elementary space.
So that's very helpful, Ms. Knoll. Thank you so much. So what we're saying is that in these standards, even though they're 9 through 12, sometime between 9th and 12th grade, student will have to take at least one semester of computer science.
One full credit, yes, Mr. Chairman. And I think when I look at the numbers at the high school level, 25% would be maximum enrollment or around that, because that would be getting 1/4 of your students that one credit, at least 1 year within their 4 years in that high school.
Okay. All right.
I would agree with your point, though, that more broadly, computer science is one class, and it's important that that content information is being spread out in other content areas.
I think as we continue to move forward, I know the challenges with AI, I know all the ethical challenges with that. The concerns about AI are right,
Yeah.
but AI is a tool and it's here to stay. And we need to figure out a way to effectively use it for education, whether it's in computer science or it's in literacy or it's in geography or history. I mean, it is here, it's a tool. And I don't know how higher ed, we ought to be talk about collaboration. We need to be collaborating with higher ed and kind of developing this overall strategy for using information. AI is a way to do that. So and I know these committees that we have, statewide committees are supposed to do that, but we had one for education. That would be great. I don't know, Mr. Gentile, are you?
Yeah, I often get asked or I often ask myself, what's the space for the higher ed commission in this work? And I think for our world, it's identifying or bringing together best practices, what's working well, less of a centralized approach from our perspective, but to see we've got some pockets of innovation happening across Tennessee. To put a light on that spotlight and to do so in collaboration with the K-12 would be fantastic.
I think if you look at, like, say, as you're doing at other states, you'll, again, as we had Ms. Knoll with the state of Maine, and it seems like that they have a very active program there. I think we can learn a lot and just continue to move things forward.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Brandon, for being with us today. And it was great to see you last week. As
Thank you.
Chairman mentioned at that AI convening where there, I mean, there's just such an appetite, I think, across our state to continue to learn about AI and how it can appropriately support teaching and learning, and where we need to be really cautious and have the right guardrails. So I'm appreciative of the partnership with you and Deb Knowles and your team, because I think this is so much an evolving space, particularly the AI component. Had some questions. I feel like they've largely been answered, but I think we can continue to work together to use our working group for good feedback between first and final reading. I think Mr. Jensen's point about making sure we have enough industry eyes on the standards is a good one too, just to both build awareness with the industry partners in our state, but also to check ourselves if there's anything that might be missing. I think the feedback that we've gotten so far on the standards is really positive. So kudos to you and your team for really putting together a strong first draft that I think elevates the work and incorporates AI in really appropriate ways. I think the part that I'm excited about now is really thinking about how we support districts and teachers and in the educating that they need to really deploy them effectively, to put appropriate safeguards in place for AI in particular. But I think this foundation of computer science is one that all students are really going to benefit from. So it's exciting to see that continue to see more uptake across the state. Are there ways that we can support you, like board members, especially between first and final, beyond just kind of continuing to have these conversations? Is there any more that you think would be helpful as we continue to move forward with the work?
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. I'm definitely open to additional feedback always. If there are blind spots that we may have, or if there are, again, Mr. Chairman, you recommended Maine as a resource and a collaborator. I think that's great. Other industry partners that you mentioned, I think those are all great directions. Point me that way, and I will work on making those connections and building them out for sure.
Great. Well, thank you. We appreciate your partnership.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a things on the presentation, very engaging. Just one question, I'm noticing that we're putting a lot of AI in everything now, and I'm a proponent. I think AI will be the future. However, my question is, how can we incorporate this within not just computer science, also other standards as well, without it being a reliance? And that's one of the critical things I hear not just students say, because I have many students that are they pro AI, anti AI, different teachers, principals have told me, they're like, hey, how is the state going to balance the thing between teaching it, because it's a 21st century, it's a modern 21st century thing, but also making sure it's not, a reliance to where now all of a sudden we've got 30, 60 students in the class, we got 20, 15, 20, 25, 30 students in the classroom using AI for everything. So how do you manage to balance that? And yeah, thank you. Now, yield.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. That is a $1 million question, I think. There are definitely concerns about outsourcing critical thinking and creativity to AI tools. I will say that technology has evolved and will continue to evolve. This may look different, but I feel like we will see similar patterns. However, all of those concerns are something we have to be aware of throughout this process. How do we teach students how to use it in a way that does not diminish their ability to learn and create and be productive members of society is key to how we present this within schools and how we prepare our teachers for that. I also recognize that there is a large group of young people like yourself that are anti-AI and don't want to touch it. There are classrooms where teachers have students just refusing to use something that has AI in it because of their own personal beliefs or ethics or moral thoughts around the subject. I think that's something we have to continue to work at, and I don't have an answer there, but I appreciate the question. I think it's something that those questions are continuing to come up around.
Yes, Ms. Cobb.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I think you're reading my mind over here. Because as an elementary school teacher, especially working in special education, it is very difficult to teach students how to write. So that's my concern about AI, is that we're not using that as a crutch to always refer to AI to write our story for us or our paragraph for us. So I'm just very cautious about making sure the standards that we have for AI address that.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. I think that's very fair, and I think that part of the CS standards, we teach the bias and inaccuracies that can come from the usage of AI tools. And I think that's really key to that student understanding.
Yeah, I think if we continue to remember, it is a tool. It is not a replacement for the teachers.
100%,
And,
Mr. Chairman.
Other comments or questions? Well, thank you, Mr. Smith. It is exciting to see the emphasis and the collaboration that's taking place as we continue to move these standards forwards and to offer the opportunities to students in an ethical and right way to do it. And we're here to help in any way we can, and glad you're in the role that you're in, and look forward to continued collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'm also happy to help you make those connections I mentioned earlier.
I would welcome that. Thank you very much.
Next item is federal accountability updates. Dr. David Laird.
Good afternoon, Chairman Eby, members of the board. I am David Laird, the Assistant Commissioner for Assessment, Accountability, and Research. And I'm here to present a very different item than a lot of the ones that I present historically. I don't have any statistics or any models or any results to present today. What I'm here to do is to simply describe a scope of work that the department intends to undertake. There are some things that we'd like to accomplish in the accountability space for schools and districts, but they could be significant. And so we're trying to foreshadow the scope of work that's coming and also the process we intend to undertake to discuss this with districts and schools, to have a collaborative conversation about how we can accomplish some of these objectives. Really the big idea of what I wish to discuss today is how Tennessee could get from two different accountability systems to one accountability system. At present, we maintain two separate and distinct processes for evaluating schools and districts as well. We have our federal system and we have our state system. That's really not good for anybody. I really don't think that's up for dispute. We've surveyed directors of schools over the past few years about whether or not they feel like this is problematic, and consistently the department has felt, and we hear from directors of schools, that having two different systems that, while correlated strongly, could potentially say different things about a school's performance in the same year is just not a place I think any of us wish to remain. And so our ultimate goal that the commissioner has essentially set out for us is to try to get from two accountability systems down to a single accountability system. So we have our Every Student Succeeds Act system, or our federal system. This was designed back in 2015-16, first implemented in 2017-18, and was originally designed to be a letter grade system. We obviously have a state law here in Tennessee that requires us to produce a letter grade for schools, and that original federally designed system was intended to do that. Now, in 22-23, we ultimately decided to pivot and produce a state letter grade system. There was a lot of, I won't rehash all of the discussion and discourse that took place at that time, but I think it is fair and balanced to say that we essentially have two systems that both evaluate schools, but they really are intended to answer slightly different questions. I'm not here to disparage the federal system in any way, but it is a system that was designed to do something very specific. And ultimately, it was decided that that particular tool was not the best tool or the only tool to communicate not just to the educators, but to all of the Tennessee community about what was going on with our schools in that year. And I'll explain briefly some of the differences between the two systems. But again, I'm not here to say that one is good or one is bad, but ultimately what we want to accomplish is to get down to one. Accountability systems, when we talk about an accountability system, they're generally thinking two pieces to that. The feds call the first piece the annual system of meaningful differentiation, which basically means we identify our number of indicators, we figure out a way to aggregate them together and array the performance of all schools and districts. In most states, it looks something like a bell curve of performance, of aggregated performance. With that bell curve in place, we then figure out where to put cut points in certain places, and those cut points are intended to identify schools and assign to them specific designations. So in Tennessee, we have reward schools. It's a positive designation. That's essentially the top component of our federal system. The schools that achieve an A, or what would have been an A in the federal system, are our reward schools. We also identify schools for poor performance. So we have priority schools for overall low performance in ELA and math or grad rate, and we also identify focus schools. All of these things are federal requirements, and our federal system was designed to accomplish that task. I will say a key component of the design of our federal system is to recognize that at its start, and intentionally so, the federal system was designed to evaluate primarily the change in performance from schools from one year to next. We would often sort of colloquially say it was heavily weighted on growth, so that schools could identify as being very strong schools because in the past year, they had a very positive impact on their students. And it is right and appropriate that our federal system does that. What ultimately proved to be the challenge of the federal system, however, is that that growth was so prominent in what the federal model did, was that you could have schools that we would essentially assign very high letter grades to. They could be A's or they could be B's, and their overall level of performance was still rather low. What was being achieved for those students, their proficiency rates, could be less than 20%. Now, the educators had a very positive impact, and so it does an effective job of answering the question, how far did we move those kids? And that is an important question that I don't mean to diminish. But ultimately, the department decided that if we wanted to communicate clearly and accurately to parents and to members of the community, it would be, in fact, not accurate to say, this is an incredibly strong school if the overall performance the school was achieving was actually not what we would want for the majority of our kids. And so when we talk about the state system that was designed, the state system was designed to essentially recalibrate the weight of the change in performance of growth. The actual performance that's being achieved for students in that year is more heavily weighted in the state system. So that if we're actually saying this school is merits an A or merits a B, in our state system, you could be more confident that what's actually produced in that year for the students at that school would be higher than what it was in our federal system. Now, again, that's not to say one of these is right and one of these is wrong, but they answer slightly different questions, and we can all have a much more productive conversation if we truly understand what they're intended to do. It's also, I think, accurate and appropriate to say that our state system is far simpler than our federal system. We understand in order for accountability to be good for anything, people have to be able to understand it. They have to find that it's transparent. They have to find that it's fair. And while our federal system is a good tool for what it was, it is, to be clear, a Russian doll of nested descriptive statistics. There is just a lot to unpack in there, and our state system is far fewer indicators. It assesses the achievement of students on TCAP tests. It looks at the growth. It looks at the growth of its lowest performing students and whether or not kids are college and career ready, and those are the only indicators that factor into it. So it doesn't answer every question about performance by any means, but there is a simplicity to it that the department finds valuable. What I want to describe here is how we intend to have conversations with districts in Tennessee about how we could get from two systems to one system. I do want to highlight, however, though, that this is the model that the department has been working toward every single year. We want there to be a constant, stable, and repeatable process. So any year in which we consider accountability changes, the calendar will always be the same. We have an advisory group of directors that we'll start having conversations with in September. We will, as we'll do that month, also go to the TOS conference, and we'll explain to the directors there our intent for the things that we wish to do. The department will spend the fall going to all 8 superintendent study councils and asking for specific feedback on the list that I'm going to share later in the presentation. How does the field feel about the solutions we should entertain? So we'll go to all 8 regional meetings in the fall. We will then go back into the lab during the winter, take the feedback that we heard from the fall, and model out a set of recommendations for how we should actually make adjustments to our accountability system. We'll then do another complete cycle of visits to regional meetings. We'll do a series of statewide webinars for directors, but also for accountability and assessment folks in districts. And at that point in time, we'll present and say, here are our specific recommendations. I strongly suspect because some of these changes will be pretty significant, we will also model out the school data and we'll give that to districts. So not only are we telling you the calculation changes, we will model the data and show you what it would do using prior year data. We'll do one last round of statewide feedback at that point in time. We will then come back to the board with our final set of changes, in addition to just submitting a series of amendments and waivers to the U.S. Department of Education, because to accomplish this task, that will be a necessary step. And our hope would be, and I realize this slide says a May protocol release. That's our standard process. We won't get there this year, but July, certainly August, our intent is to beat the start of school next year. We want to have this wrapped up so that folks can start the year next year knowing how they're going to be held accountable. So let me actually just jump ahead. We initially foreshadowed an intent to do this work last spring. I apologize, last summer. The U.S. Department of Education in the summer of 25 released a letter that suggested, somewhat broadly, that states had a lot of flexibility to perhaps be exempted of many of the provisions in ESSA. A lot of the accountability provisions, and there are dozens, are potentially optional. So we began speaking to directors about this last year. Ultimately, however, it proved to be not quite what that letter suggested to us. And ultimately, it led to a convening last April where the U.S. Department of Education basically summoned all the states to Washington and said, let us clarify for you what really is on the table and what isn't. And essentially, we now have what I feel very confident is a laundry list of all of the actual ESSA requirements that could not be exempted. And so we've essentially cross-referenced that against our state accountability system. If our state accountability system were to stand on its own and be our only accountability system in Tennessee, we have a list of the things that it would have to be adjusted to allow it to meet ESSA requirements. And that's essentially a subset of that is what you see on the list here. Please.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, I noticed that EL, English Language Proficiency Assessment is on here. So could you tell me what that is real quick?
Well, so I'll go through each one of these in just a sec, if that's okay.
And last question, why is like math not on here? I think math, especially like in the younger grades, is something that's very critical, you know.
Excellent. So let me speak to that. And we'll take the indicators first. I indicated there in shorthand for proficiency and growth.
Okay.
ESSA requirement is ELA and math performance have to be included as part of any proficiency calculation and for the growth calculation. And that is, to your point, non-negotiable.
Mhm.
We have to continue to include that. Now, Tennessee's letter grade system uses a weighted average of other subject areas. So we actually include more than just ELA and math in our letter grade system. That's a Tennessee choice. But without a doubt, ELA and math is required. An assessment of English language proficiency. ESSA requires us, and we've been doing this in Tennessee for decades now, to assess English, a student who's identified as an English language learner. When they enroll in the district, we evaluate them upon enrollment. We also evaluate them every spring and every spring thereafter until they ultimately demonstrate through their English language proficiency results, or English language development is the appropriate term, their capability as an English language learner. So there is an ESSA data point that we use in our federal accountability system that essentially evaluates a growth standard for English language learners. How much progress have they made in achieving towards English language proficiency? And we evaluate this for every English language learner every year. That is a data point that US Ed has communicated to us is non-negotiable. It is also not in our letter grade system right now. So if our letter grade system were to become the one and only accountability system that we have in Tennessee, we would have to figure out how to incorporate the English language proficient assessments results into our letter grade system. There are a number of ways different states are accomplishing that feat, and I'm happy to talk about that if that's of interest, but that's potentially a very significant change. And hence, that's really the reason why the department is forecasting this conversation. Some of these changes could be very significant. The department is not comfortable just making these decisions for folks. And that's why we're signaling our intent to have these conversations. The US Ed grad rate in the indicator bucket is another one that's potentially consequential. There are two different grad rates at use in Tennessee, and this is, again, not where we want to be, but the reality is we have long had in Tennessee a state board approved pathway for a child to receive a general education diploma if they have an IEP specific for math and science, and they take a subset of courses. So they, as long as they take algebra and geometry and it conforms to their IEP, that child can receive a general ed diploma. When we were served with compliance findings by the US Department of Education a number of years ago, that was one of the things that they flagged for us is simply not acceptable for federal requirements. You can't give two kids a gen ed diploma if they take different courses. And so ever since that point, we have had two different grad rates. We've had the Tennessee grad rate where it's included, and we've had the federal grad rate. The federal system uses the federal grad rate. Our letter grade system uses the Tennessee grad rate. If we were to go to one system, we would theoretically have to find a place for the federal grad rate in our letter grade system. There are a couple ways. We have some preliminary ideas for how we could accomplish that without simply replacing the Tennessee grad rate. But again, it's significant enough that we would want to really discuss that with the field before we tried to move unilaterally in that space. The other big bucket of work here are the designations. So the federal government really only cares about essentially the negative or the low performance designations. We have to have CSI or priority schools. We have to have TSI or focus schools. That will be maintained in our letter grade system in some way, shape, or form. But I'll also just perhaps reassuringly, it's also something that the department doesn't necessarily feel is broken. We don't have a problem with how we're necessarily doing that. Now we're happy to take feedback on that. It will be part of the conversation, but it's not a place where we're necessarily looking for a solution. The other one that I do want to call out, which I know is of great interest to folks, is the reward designation. At present, the reward designation is explicitly tied to our federal system. Our federal system creates that ranking, and whichever schools would have earned an A in the old federal system, those are our reward schools. So if that system of annual meaningful differentiation went away, we would have to replace that methodology with a new one. We are, and please, this is maybe the most important thing I will say, we are not getting rid of reward schools. That will always continue to exist. We realize how important that is for folks, but we would have to create a new approach for it, something that is derived from a version of our letter grade system as opposed to the federal system. What I also want to call out, and this is really just the department intending to be thorough, people hate it when accountability keeps changing, right? If we're constantly moving the bar, people understandably hate that. We are potentially opening Pandora's box here because some of those changes are pretty significant. And so we have done the work thus far to sort of do a lap around the department and other stakeholders and say, if we're going to make changes, what other topics should we be discussing so that we can make as many changes at one time and sort of slow down the constant churn of changes. And so the slide here contains a list of additional topics, not that we made decisions on, but additional topics that we intend to discuss with the field as part of this change. So increasing the weight of the college and career readiness indicator in the letter grade system is something that we've discussed in a number of spaces. Deb Knoll and her team are doing amazing work to try to continue to change and improve the offerings for students to make them college and career ready. Work-based learning is something that we're discussing. If that really is something that we need and we want to incentivize that, we want to figure out or at least have a conversation about how that could be incorporated into our accountability system. There are a couple places where the TISA bonus calculations diverge from accountability calculations. That's another thing that folks, I mean, we never want to be in that place unless there's a particularly compelling reason, and we actually think there might not necessarily be as a compelling reason for those two to be different. So pulling them into alignment is something that we want to accomplish. Obviously, I mentioned revising the reward school methodology. The federal government doesn't require it, but we intend to continue to maintain it. We're also excited about potentially creating some new positive school designations. So are there other ways that we can recognize really good work of schools that aren't inherently baked into the letter grade system? Some growth specific designations, we want to have conversations with directors and with educators across the state about what that might look like. There are also two TBOS topics that we intend to bring up. One's an old one about the potential effect size adjustment and pushing that into play. The other thing that we wish to discuss with the field is primarily intended not to change the TBOS calculation, but to simplify it. For those that have been in the weeds, you're aware there's two different flavors of TBOS, basically. There's what we call the predictive model, and then there's also a version called the gain model. The predictive model is used in grade 3 and EOC. Historically, it's always worked better when there wasn't a ton of data. So if we're switching tests in high school or for grade 3 when there's only the grade 2 test, predictive model has been used in that place because historically it performs a little better. Then we use the gain model in grades 4 through 8. What the department is curious to discuss is essentially just pulling the gain model out and using the predictive model everywhere. Again, just simplicity. TBOS is difficult enough to understand for folks in the best of times. Having to understand potentially two different versions of it at an elementary school or the transition from middle schools, we actually don't really feel that's necessarily warranted. We think there are some other adjustments that have been put in place that make that unnecessary. We also feel that the predictive model in particular is a little bit more intuitive when it comes to rolling up student results to a teacher or a school. When you're going through the gain model, you sort of have to convert a student scale score through normal curve equivalent scores through NCEs. And it's just very hard to see what a kid's contribution was to the ultimate composite. The predictive model is really much better in that regard. There are ways that you can aggregate together with pretty simple math the predictive model in ways that will align to what you see in the composites. So we actually think that from a more formative standpoint, there might actually just be some real benefit from paring down to the predictive model as well. So again, we have not made a decision. I'm not here standing to say the department is going in that direction. All I'm really here today to do is to say we are considering some large changes. And because of that, we want to be very transparent in our intent to have conversations. So what I'm presenting here, we have talked about previously in a few other places. We started talking with a few directors at the TVOS Summit this summer. We will run through this list with directors at the TOS conference next month. And again, we will go to all 8 regional meetings and listen to folks' opinions on these. And then we'll do the exact same thing again in the winter. But at that point in time, we'll come back with specific recommendations. So at that point in time, we'll indicate yes or no for the predictive model. We'll come back with options for how the ELPA indicator could be included based on the initial round of feedback. And then ultimately, we'll come back to the board with a set of recommendations. So with that said, that is what we're working on and roughly speaking, how we intend to do that. And I'm happy to take clarifying questions.
Thank you, Dr. Laird. Questions? Ms. McIntyre, did you have a question?
I just have a comment. I'm very impressed. I'm excited. This is a big thing a big task to take on, and I think it'll be great. The simpler, the better. I know we've had conversations about how complicated TVAS is, and even though I've lived it for 20 years, there's still so many things. So the more you can do to simplify and be able to explain, the better. I'd love for you to come to my school and present if you ever have time or want to come to East Tennessee.
Dr. Maxwell.
I will be doing a tour. I will be doing a tour this fall, so we can chat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Laird, thank you so much. I concur with Mrs. McInturf. Whatever we can do to simplify this process for all the stakeholders, because I've sat in the federal chair and the superintendent's chair, and I can testify, we definitely need to simplify this for everyone. So thank you for your efforts.
Yesterday, Dr. Morrison and Ms. Reed and I were at the new superintendent study training session, and this was a hot topic, as you well know, and exactly what you're doing, getting down to one accountability system was one of the issues that was brought up both to us as board members, but also to TDOE in their session. Also, another topic that came up was the letter grade system, and I think you'll be hearing a lot about that too. So,
Yep, I echo all the thanks, Dr. Laird. It's great to be starting to have real conversations about the changes that we might consider to get to one system, because I know you were part of the conversations the board had as part of the accountability hearings that we held in March. But it's a hard place to be where we have these systems where we're saying, these are your failing schools on the F, rating system, and then these are your failing schools, the priority schools, and there's only resources really driving to one of those systems, the priority schools. And so trying to reconcile that so we can, put our money where our mouth is too, I think will be great. I hesitate to ask this one, but do you feel confident that you've kind of gotten to the place where you understand the biggest hangups with the federal accountability changes that we want to make? I mean, I heard you say ELL assessments and grad rate. Are those kind of the big things that we need to figure out in terms of appeasing the federal piece so that we could get to one approval for one system? Or did I misunderstand you?
No, there are, those are, I think, the larger items. There are some smaller items on there that I'm a little less concerned about being problematic. I think we need to make some decisions. There are also a couple in there where there really just aren't a lot of options, right? And so we always want to be careful about not asking for feedback if we kind of just know what we have to do. And there's a few smaller items in there where we'll certainly be fully transparent about it. But again, I want to honor people's time and judgment. And if we know what we're going to do, I'm just going to explain it and not necessarily ask about it. I will say that we felt like at a point in time, we had worked through a very detailed list with the U.S. Department of Education. We sat down at a table and talked through, I felt like, in detail, and our laundry list was long, but I think very clear. Of course, could potentially be change there. They've had a lot of staffing turnover and changes. And so I can't stand before you and say that I absolutely know, I know everything we need to accomplish, and that if we do these things, our amendments and waivers will sail through. But I know that I was very clear on that list as of April of last year. And as long as we don't see considerable churn, I feel like we know how to move forward.
Thank you. That's helpful. So we have two big things and then some other things that are maybe
There
easier.
are definitely some other pieces, smaller pieces.
Other questions for Dr. Laird?
I do.
Yeah, Ms. Conlon.
Thank you, Dr. Laird. Just so that I understand, is it basically the goal to move toward one system and each state have ownership of their reporting data? And if so, how long do you think that timeline is going to take?
Well, even in the advent of the ESSA system, each state always had some flexibility to design an accountability system as long as it conformed to this laundry list of constraints. So accountability in Tennessee has been different than in Virginia and a variety of other places for a few years. They're now potentially going to start looking even more difficult or different from each other simply because we now have more flexibility. And so, yeah, I think you are going to start to see accountability systems that diverge, but there's always been some differences in how different states met the ESSA requirement. ESSA literally just has a bucket where it says you need to identify an additional indicator and plug it in here. Tennessee uses chronic absenteeism to meet that requirement, but other states have used very different indicators in that particular position in their accountability systems. So we've always looked a little different. Now we might potentially look quite a bit different.
Well, the reason I ask that is because apparently it's the goal to eventually reduce more and more the federal Department of Education to the point where all the states have control of their guidelines.
We understood that initially as well. So I mentioned when that letter came out last summer, it sounded initially very broad. And so we sort of heard it from the same frame that consistent with your comments. It ultimately proved not to be the case when we actually sat down with the U.S. Department of Education. They had a much bigger list of the must-dos. And that's really what I'm returning to you here now. There's actually a lot more that is staying in ESSA than perhaps we had initially suspected. And that's why we sort of paused the work last year and are coming back around this year. So it's not going away quite to the extent that we thought it might.
I find that some departments are kind of moved over into other departments, but the size of the department seems to be staying the same.
Well, our understanding is a lot of people left and then they came back. So it's been a lot of flux. It's been a real challenge to really understand what we need to do to stay on the right side of that.
Any other further questions? Thank you, Dr. Laird. We'll be tracking it. You don't need to leave because I think you're up next again.
If it's all right, Justin and I are just going to move to the table. Is that
Oh,
okay?
sure. Go ahead. Next item is 2025, 2026 TCAP results.
Good afternoon, Chairman Eby, members of the board. I am David Laird, Assistant Commissioner for Assessment, Accountability, and Research, and I am very pleased to be joined by Dr. Justin Keeney, a Senior Research Analyst. He was only a research analyst the last time he was here. We're very pleased to have kept Justin around. Even after he completed his doctorate at Vanderbilt, we've managed to hang on to him, and we're thrilled about that. He and I are going to be presenting an item on TCAP test results for 2026. Our intent here is really to walk through the data and to summarize sort of the themes and trends that we see in the test results. Having done this, Justin and I, for a few years now, we know there are often a number of questions that really want to get into the why of it all. And I'll just flag that Christy Brown is also coming up later on in the agenda. She is also sort of primed and ready. So if there are any questions as to why we're seeing results or improvements in particular places, Justin and I might not be the right people to answer those questions. But Ms. Brown is sort of standing by to get to any of those questions that we can't get to. Tennessee does have quite a significant portfolio of assessments. We create TCAP assessments in grade 2 in ELA and math on an optional basis. About 60% of schools in the state of Tennessee choose to administer a second grade TCAP in ELA and math. We do ELA math and social study, or in science rather, in grades 3 through 8. We do science in grades 6, or social studies in grades 6 through 8. We also have a portfolio of high school end of course exams tied to specific courses. So we support 2 different 3-course progressions in math. Students obviously only take one of the 2 progressions. We have the traditional progression that's algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, in addition to continuing to support integrated math 1, 2, and 3. We also do a U.S. history assessment and a biology assessment. We also have general education and alternative education versions of all of our TCAP tests. The department's primary role in the administration of this program is to do really 2 things. 1, ensure alignment to the standards, and 2, to ensure a consistency of the standard that we're applying. As we'll describe here and is consistent across the country, people often look at these from a longitudinal standpoint. Are we continuing to go up or are we continuing to go down? The department works very hard to make sure that we maintain a consistent standard in Tennessee and support that longitudinal interpretation. So we spend great interest every time the standards are revised. That's obviously an important moment for us. We have, I think, really improved our coordination with the state board around the revision of standards and increased the transparency of what we would call the standard setting process. So when standards are revised sufficiently, we essentially have to create a new test and redo the scoring. So in 2024, we went through a standard setting process for high school math. We recently completed, just this summer, a standard setting process for our science assessments. We'll do social studies in 2 years, and then we'll do ELA for standard setting in 2030. So again, that's just an important part of our work, and I think an important piece of overlap between the work of the state board and the work of the department. In terms of, again, just for clarity about what we're presenting and what we're not presenting the results of the grade 2 assessment. Because it's optional, it doesn't necessarily stand in for the performance of Tennessee. It's only the performance of a subset of districts, so we're not including it here. We're also not including the performance of our ALT or DLM students in this particular assessment, but if that's of interest to the board, we're happy to come back another time and talk through that specifically. And just as a reminder, our middle school and high school TCAP assessments are administered online, whereas our elementary TCAPs are administered on paper. In terms of the big takeaways for our results, I am pleased to report that Tennessee has been on, as I'm sure all of you are aware, a really strong run of performance. We have made incremental but very consistent gains in our lower grade TCAP performance, sporadically in our upper grades, but we've also seen what seems like a pretty compelling or increasingly compelling trend of improvements in middle school performance that seem to have been almost growing out of our elementary performance. And it's something that we're watching carefully. I am pleased to report that that trend has largely continued. We continue to see improvements in lower grade performance. 44.9% of our third graders met Tennessee's expectations for the TCAP test, which is the highest that it's ever been in this incarnation of TCAP tests. Now, just for a bit of history, Tennessee significantly overhauled the TCAP assessment program in 2015-16 for administration in 2017-18. For our purposes, because that overhaul was so significant, we would never really think to compare test score performance for anything prior to that. Proficiency rates in Tennessee dropped by, I think more than 10 percentage points, if not considerably more than that at that particular time. And I do want to highlight, we're lauding 44.9% performance as having met expectations as the high watermark for Tennessee, and it is, and that's laudable. Of course, many people might look at that number and say, well, that's actually not that many students. And I think it's right. We always want to get that number to 100%. But I do want to highlight that Tennessee does have very high expectations by design. The definition set in 2015-16, what it means as a matter of policy to meet expectations on the TCAP test is a comprehensive and thorough understanding of the standards. That's the terminology that we use. All of our scoring processes work back from that language, comprehensive and thorough. So when we say 44.9% of the students passed the test or met proficiency, what we're saying is 44.9% of the students have a comprehensive and thorough understanding of the standards of the course that they were in.
Do other states have lower standards then?
Some states have considerably lower standards. And again, that's obviously, I think, a loaded phrase for me to utter, but really everybody triangulates through the NAEP assessment, right? It's the one test that everybody takes. Tennessee is one of the few states that has historically evaluated proficiency right on, and in some cases, in fact, even slightly above in some years, where NAEP essentially identifies their proficiency cut. There are other states that are 20 percentage points off NAEP's definition of proficiency. Tennessee was once, in fact, in that boat as well. And that's really when we recalibrated in 2017-18. And it's an objective fact. Comprehensive and thorough is a high bar. And we have worked very hard to maintain that bar so that as we see improvements in scores, we know we've held the standard constant, and then we can actually embrace the improvements that we're seeing. And so middle school is a really good example of that. Historically, 8th grade has been sort of the low water mark for ELA performance in Tennessee for a very long time, and it remains lower to this day. But we are up since 2022, almost 6.5% in 8th grade ELA. And we are one of the few states nationally that has actually improved 8th grade ELA performance over that time. There's only a handful of states that actually didn't lose ground in 8th grade ELA performance from 22 to 24, and Tennessee is one of those. So we're very pleased to report that what we're seeing in our test scores is very much consistent, and I think is being corroborated by what we're seeing with the NAEP results. As Dr. Keeney will detail, we're also going to present some additional data on subgroup performance. We continue to look at the experience of all students in Tennessee and what's being achieved for them. We're happy to report that that improvement that we're seeing overall is a bit of a rising tide. We're not, all subgroups seem to be benefiting from that, though largely speaking, we're not necessarily closing achievement gaps, but we're seeing consistent levels of similar progress. We're also going to present a little bit of detail on locale. Tennessee is an incredibly diverse state. We have some really big cities and we have some really small rural districts. And so we always internally look at that data to see the extent to which all of Tennessee is experiencing the benefits. And Dr. Keeney will detail a fair bit of that data as well. And so with that said, if there's no sort of clarifying questions, I will turn it over to Dr. Keeney and he'll walk us through the results.
Thank you, Dr. Laird. I'm Justin Keeney, Senior Data Analyst on the Accountability and Assessment team at the department, and I'm excited to share some more detailed results with you. First, let's start with the TCAP results in English Language Arts. And of course, as we share these results with you, please feel free to stop me and ask us questions or at any time. So student English Language Arts performance increased for the 5th straight year. With 42.3% of Tennessee students across grades 3 through 10 meeting or exceeding expectations, which was higher than last year's 40.9% high mark. And this trend is driven by the number of students in that approaching expectations category in green continuing to decrease, with a corresponding increase in the number of students scoring at met expectations in that gray category. So this slide depicts the performance across all grades. Proficiency grades are observed in nearly all grades that we test. And this is evident when we break down ELA performance by grade band, where we can see that all 3 of the grade bands, elementary, middle, and high, continue to see an increase in overall ELA proficiency. And the kind of specific mechanics of how that happens are consistent with the overall results. It's students in the approaching category, the proportion of the students in that green category decreasing, and the students in the met expectations category, the category above, right above proficiency in gray there, increasing. There are slightly bigger increases coming in the earlier grades this year. That said, those earlier grades have more room to increase or improve because high school continues to lead all grade bands in ELA with a 47.7 proficiency rate, elementary school at 45, and middle school at 36. Dr. Laird mentioned that we do track performance by locale closely. And if we break down performance by locale, we also see an increase across all locale types. Like Dr. Laird said, in ELA, as in most subjects, suburban areas where more than half of the students in suburban areas are testing proficient at the met or exceeded level. Suburban areas continue to outpace the other areas.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Can you go back one slide? So if I see this continual increase for an elementary school, okay, up to 45%, and then I see this precipitous drop in middle school, and then I see again the increase in high school. What's happening in middle school?
That's a great question. So what's happening in high school to cause, are you talking about the increase in the overall proficiency rates?
Yeah, I mean, I think one would expect that at least you would maintain the level, but hopefully as a student is progressing through, and since you get this big increase in high school, then they're obviously making a really big jump from middle school to high school. So something's happening in middle school that's keeping it down to 35%, significantly below elementary school and also below high school. So something obviously is happening in middle school that's being detrimental to the students.
Well, Chairman Eby, I think that's almost certainly a multifaceted issue. I'm sure that there's an enormous amount going on there where I would, and I think it relates to the work of the board a little bit as well, is the introduction of new standards and content. Is the introduction of new standards and content. What we see historically, if you break this out even further, there is a massive jump in performance between English 1 and English 2. English 2 proficiency rates by school are 10 to 12 percentage points higher than they are for English 1. And that is largely understood to be a product of the fact that the standards in English 2 are very similar to the standards in English 1. The bar and the expectation shifts a little bit, but the reality is there is not a ton of additional content that is introduced in high school ELA, certainly not in the extent to which the progression through middle school is constantly introducing new standards and material. So we have for years just naturally seen increases in English 2 proficiency that really, I think, elevate high school ELA performance in particular. And again, I'm sure there are a number of things going on there, and I'll invite other people from the department to speak to some of the other things. But I am certainly aware that I think there may be some element of the standards not really being as different. And students actually just get another opportunity to demonstrate their improvement.
Just seems to me that this is pretty obvious discrepancy here that we would spend a considerable effort to try to understand so that we can get those back up, what it is. So just comment.
But, and we may need to come back, and we were actually, Justin and I were discussing maybe even for next year, what this chart does not show quite as well is essentially a cohort view of this performance. I mean, what we've all been talking about for a number of years is we saw about 4 years ago a really precipitous jump in 3rd grade ELA performance. And then we saw it in 4th grade, and then we saw it in 5th grade, and now we've seen it in 6th and potentially even 7th grade. And so that, I think, it's an important piece of perhaps what your question is getting at, is to what extent are we actually addressing this progression? And just showing this year over year, I don't think is calling that out. But I do think there's some reason for optimism, and we could come back at another time and perhaps play that out a little bit more clearly.
I have a question.
Yeah, Ms. Crowe.
Something that just keeps jumping out at me. Suburban areas continue to lead all locales. You may be addressing that later on, but is there an explanation as to why that is now?
Gosh, I don't think I could speak to that. Historically, that has always, I think, been the case in Tennessee. I would be curious to look at incoming levels of performance. I mean, the reality is that seems to be a fairly stable. You don't see a lot of individual variation in that regard. And so it may have certainly something to do with the schools in those communities, but it may also have something to do with the communities themselves.
Yeah, so on that note, suburban areas do continue to outpace the other areas in ELA, although all areas are growing. Suburban areas, we're at a 51.6% proficiency rate. Rural areas behind that at 45.5%. Towns at 39%, and urban areas at 37.1%. And like the overall results, these increases are driven by the shrinking of that green category of the students who are just below proficiency in the approaching expectations category, and an increase in the students in the gray category, the met expectations, the folks just above the proficiency line. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you go back a slide? Okay, so one thing I just noticed is like the elementary school and middle school below expectation band, right? When we look at elementary, middle school, it's between the mid to low 20s, right? But then you go into high school and it's teens. So my thing about it is, where is the disconnect happening between elementary and middle school math? ELA correction, and what can we do? Because high school English is considerably more challenging compared to middle school, elementary school. So my question is, are we adequately preparing our students in order to actually be able to receive instruction in high school? I understand we have the 3rd grade retention law that was passed back in 21, 22, but what else is the department actually doing in order to help alleviate that? Because if we don't alleviate that, then there's most likely going to be a chance that those numbers are going to carry on into the next thing. Because again, with the next graduate was the next class.
Well, I'm going to jump in. Hi, nice to meet you. Lizette Reynolds. So sorry, I had an event earlier. I came in late, so I'm going to see if I can add some color to this. First off, and I don't know if this was stated, but we have to remember the kids in middle school, those were our COVID kids. So they missed some very critical years in their development and in being prepared. the way we're preparing right now to address the third grade retention law, right? So have just started, we started implementation on the early literacy work around 2023. So all these policies have passed, and so now we're in the implementation stages. Since then, we've implemented, a collaboration with EPPs to make sure we have the right reading course for all teachers, and they have to pass a reading test in order to teach the early literacy piece. And then we have obviously new standards. We have just a plethora of policies and activities and professional development, very strong professional development that's been going on now here for 3 years. Now, one of the things I know we were talking about middle school. Not only, we don't want to excuse the fact that, yes, these are kids that probably miss some critical skills, but the fact of the matter is, as you said, the rigor is higher. And we have received a $27 million grant from the federal government last year. Did I get that right? Last year. And we're focusing that work on the adolescent literacy space. So, and the difference between, implementing an early literacy law and the adolescent literacy space is that we're not talking just about English teachers. We're talking about all content teachers. All teachers need to be prepared in order to be able to identify which students are struggling and then be able to provide the necessary referrals, right? So that those students can get the supports they need, including identifying what those deficits could be. Some of them could have missed some of the coding pieces, right? They could have missed, they may not be fluent in the vocabulary. So there are certain little pieces that we're preparing our teachers to be able to address in the way that all teachers are engaged in supporting students moving forward so that they continue to read to learn, right? As opposed to learning to read. So again, tons of work. We're actually, surprisingly, we're actually doing a lot better than the rest of the country when it comes to this area. And it is because of the commitment from many of our teachers to be able to really identify when their students are struggling. We just need to bring more cohesion and more supports in that instruction and in that learning. So again, lots of work is happening. We are very committed in working with our school districts. Our school districts have just been amazing partners in helping us, being engaged with their students, with their teachers, with their instructional leaders to support student learning. So sorry, came in a little late. So hopefully that addresses some of the concerns. Are we where we need to be? Absolutely not, but we are on the path.
No, thank you for that, Commissioner Reynolds, and thank you again for that as well. I forgot that it was COVID. It's been 7 years almost, so. Yeah. Thank you. I yield.
Mr. Gentile.
Dr. Laird, good to have you here today. Good to see both of you. Looking at, I need some education here myself. I'm trying to think about these students as they enter college. And the high school panel here, can you help me in practical terms connect approaching expectations with college readiness and what that means exactly? Because that's just on my mind. Is there an answer? If not, like we can take it offline.
So as a criterion reference test, TCAP tests are designed to evaluate Tennessee state standards to a level of performance specified as policy. Meeting expectations is a comprehensive and thorough understanding of Tennessee state standards. There is no other consideration in the scoring of the TCAP test other than pulling together committees of teachers to identify how a set of responses to a test should be understood as a comprehensive and thorough understanding of the standards. So we don't consider the performance on another assessment when we're figuring out how to score a TCAP test. Now, that work can certainly be done, right? It's called a concordance study or a concordance analysis, and we've always done those every year to understand how performance on a TCAP test relates to a performance on, say, a college entrance exam. And we use that information as we're thinking about setting cut scores and things in an accountability system. And those two assessments correlate very highly, but our TCAP program is specifically intended to be an assessment of standards, evaluated or reverse engineered from those criteria. And that's the only thing that we consider in the scoring of our TCAP program.
I think this is all very good information. I think it's important information for us to have. Obviously, 36% or 35% meeting or exceeding is not, the number that we want. That's, we've got to continue to improve that. I think what Mr. Gentile is saying over there is how or what we do, how is what we are doing preparing our students for post-secondary success. That is our mission. And so as we continue to get this data, we need to be sure that we're using the data in the right form, not just looking at numbers, but what is it? And so it goes back to the collaboration that we talked about earlier, is we need to figure out how we can take this data, use it, so that we know how we're tying it to post-secondary success into meeting the students' needs. Well, I think we got a lot of work to do there. We need to get the numbers up, but we need to understand what the numbers mean and where it's leading us.
Well, and to tie all those numbers together, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
the TCAP result is an important data point, but there are so many other ways in which
Right.
students are experiencing curriculum that's intended to help expand their opportunities. And we need to figure out how we can pull all of those data points together to tell a coherent story.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for those great questions. Breaking down the ELA performance for each of the historically underserved student subgroups, we can see, as Dr. Laird referenced earlier, the achievement has increased for all groups and is at the highest level it's been since 2019. That said, significant gaps persist between the historically underserved student subgroups and the all students group. Like the previous slides, the increase in proficiency for the subgroups is driven by the same thing, students leaving the approaching group and entering the met expectations group. For the other demographic subgroups, it's a similar story. All students are increasing both in the last year and since 2019, but there are still gaps between student groups to address. So zooming in on grade 3 specifically, a very important critical school year, the overall proficiency rate in this school year for this grade increased to 44.9% at either met or exceeded expectations from approximately 41.6 last year. So that's a significant observed change. And this is driven by, again, a number of students moving into that met expectations category. So those are the highlights for ELA. We want to talk about math as well, which is important, but is a similar, but slightly different story. Like ELA, math proficiency also increased this year by a similar amount from last year's high of 39.1% proficient in either that met expectations or exceeded expectations category to this year's proficiency rate of 40.9% proficient. And that's crossing the 40% proficiency line for the first time since 2019. And one thing that's different though with math, and that's interesting to note, is that the increase in math gains are coming as a result of decreasing the number of students in that below expectations category, the lowest proficiency level in orange. So as that, the proportion of students in that category is decreasing, the number of students in both the met expectations and exceeded expectations categories are increasing in math. And breaking math down by grade band into elementary school, middle school, and high school, we can see that this increase in performance occurred across all grade bands, middle, high, and elementary. The highest year-over-year increase we had was in high school math. High school math increased from 30.7% proficiency to 34.5% proficiency. That said, high school math did have the highest room to grow. as those high school rates continue to trail elementary school, which is at 46.5%, and middle school, which is at 40.3% proficiency rate. I do want to note for the math results, looking at that math graph, something that's really important to note is that 2024 was the first year we assessed under our new standards. So while for high school, so while you can make an apples to apples comparison for elementary school between, say, 2026 and 2021, you can't exactly make an apples to apples comparison for high school math for the years 2023 and earlier and the years 2024 and after. So you may be a natural question looking at this graph, why did the orange decrease so much in math? Well, it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison because there's new standards.
I understand that, I see what you're saying there, but just as the point that I was making before on ELA, where we had a middle school dip, now we've got the best performance is in elementary school, then we dip in middle school, and we further dip in high school. And so, I think we really need to understand what's happening here and because I would think that we would at least maintain where we are. I mean, we want to grow, we want to do better, but this is disturbing to me that you see this decrease.
Yes, I think that's a very astute and important question, figuring out why there's the change when we go across the grade bands. I do think it would take a rigorous analysis to really answer that, because the answer, I'm pretty confident, is multifaceted. I do think it's a combination of.
I agree. I don't think it's something simple to
Yes.
just say this is what's happening, but I think we need to put the resources to understand why it's happening, so then we know what we can do to reverse it.
I do think the two of the pieces of the puzzle would be what the commissioner said earlier for ELA and what Dr. Laird said, that the standards, are different across grades. And while we try to make things comparable, assessing different things, they have different levels of difficulty.
Ms. McIntyre, then Dr. Gentile.
Yeah, I think due diligence for us is just to look at those standards, because 6th grade to 7th grade is very different. Just looking at when I taught world history, it's very black and white. You've got to teach ancient, early humans and all the fun Rome things. And I think there's 48 standards in science or in social studies, and then you go to 7th grade and it's the entire Reformation, and it's a lot. So to compare from science 6th grade to 7th grade, and I think that's very similar to social studies and science like that. I mean, it's one, and it's just kids. I mean, they're going through a lot. Middle school's hard, and they're learning a lot and having a lot of the feels. And I mean, and it's not just a Tennessee issue. If you look at nationally, I mean, 6th to 7th grade is a huge dip, and I would love for that, for us to come up with a solution. Obviously, every year we're trying, but it's an animal. Middle school is, and I don't think there is a quick solution.
And no, I agree that there's not a quick solution, and I agree that there's a lot of factors, but it seems like to me that we ought to be able to put the resources on it. It may take us a few years to do it, maybe a couple of PhD dissertations, I don't know.
Well,
But when we
parent
see the
involvement
data.
too. You see parent involvement
Yeah.
in elementary school. They're helicopter parents, and then you kind of let them try to be more independent in middle school, and you don't want to call them every single day if they're missing assignments, which I try to do because I'm crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's just that too. And then in high school, you start worrying about, okay, this is real. This is going to go on their transcript. So you've also got parents that are kind of giving them that freedom in those middle grades too. So I think there's just a lot there that is just really working against middle school, and it's hard.
Dr. Gentile.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm a wildly optimistic person, but also I would, like to Dr. Laird's point earlier, I'd crave looking at cohort over time, because I think we're clumping students who are K through 5th into 6th through 8th. We might actually see a little bit more of an increase over time if we get that. And that's me being optimistic, but I'm hopeful. And also, yeah, how do you solve middle school?
Well, and to that end, we have to remember math is hierarchical, right? It's not like with English or reading where, okay, we've got to meet this thing at third grade. We need to demonstrate that kids are ready to read to learn, right? So that's kind of, you can't do that with math. If you miss fractions in fifth grade and they haven't been taught to you, where you're fluent, you have a deep understanding of how to do it and then why to do it, you're going to get lost going into these later grades, as Dr. McInturf said, right? Especially when you jump that 6 to 7, that is where I have found, well, at least personally, my son, same thing happened to him. He missed some critical elements in fifth grade that popped out in the 7th grade. And fortunately, we were able to hire a tutor at the school he was at in order to support him. And then he just knocked it out, right? So it is a number of things, and really being able to identify where those supports needed. And you have to remember too, in middle school, there is also, we are very good at response to intervention in the elementary schools. When you get to middle and high school, it's kind of like, well, that's for the little ones, right? But that's where you really need to dig in and be able to identify what are the concepts these students are missing and how are they relevant to the standards as they go through, because if they don't have everything they need by 8th grade, they're not going to be successful in Algebra 1. And as we know, that is a key lever for success in more rigorous math in high school. So I wish it was just one thing. I wish it was just the middle school phenomenon. But honestly, if you think about the implementation pieces, the work that we've been doing, the legislation that was passed last year, that we did this landscape analysis to be able to understand which school districts are doing a knockout job in math, be able to understand what it is they're doing, how that can influence our professional development, to support our teachers, to be able to identify when those gaps are happening and what they can do to be able to intervene and build that support so we can get those kids back in the tier 1 instruction so that they're learning in order to elevate their mathematical knowledge in the later grades.
I agree with everything you've said. Okay,
Except?
except when I look at 30.
Because that's how Bob and I roll.
That's right. When I look at let's see, 65% not meeting or, below expectations. I want to take what you're saying and dig into that data to the level to find out what it is. And I know it takes time. I know you can't just do it overnight, but to say it's this and it's this and it's this and it's this, why don't we put the effort to pinpoint, if it is fractions, why aren't we spending more time on fractions? If it is this,
Well,
why don't we spend more time on that?
But Bob, we are
And let me
not,
finish,
we
let
don't
me finish,
teach
let me finish.
kids.
If,
The kids
I-
are being taught in our
I
schools,
admit,
on our
I-
campuses.
I'm an engineer.
Yes, sir.
okay?
I
I'm
understand
not-
that.
I'm not an educator.
And I'm not.
And I'm not an educator. But I'm looking at it from the outside, and everybody else is looking at it from the outside like that. We need to have good answers why. Because I look at this data, and I bet you 10 other people are looking at the same data, and probably, 90% of them have the same questions I have. And we want to get the support of those people, and so let's do our best. And I know you are. I mean, I think you got 2 great people right here who's spending a lot of time doing it. I'm just trying to offer some help.
And I do like the mentioning of RTI. We do need to revamp RTI middle school because it works. You can work on phonics every single day when you're in K1. But middle school, I feel like we need to look less at skills and look at the standards that are actually being taught and collaborate more with those English teachers and those math teachers to be able to not have to use a different curriculum with Fidelity and be able to pull, okay, what are you learning in class? Let's work on that in a small group. I think that would help more than anything with those middle schoolers because I taught RTI too, and it was so hard. I loved my younger grades because it was simple. It was, okay, well, if they get these sounds and we've got it. But middle school, I mean, there's so many articles you can read to teach comprehension when you could actually be pulling from their actual books they're using in class and helping them. And I know it sounds like homework help, but I mean, I think homework help would actually be more beneficial than what we're doing. So that is something we can look at for RTI.
I think we're all in agreement. Yeah.
I definitely agree with all y'all. And but the thing I definitely see it from your perspective, Commissioner Reynolds, that there's different things that are happening. But elementary school is critical. It's where you learn the four basic arithmetic principles. It's where you learn fractions. It's where you learn how to long divide, long multiply, long subtract, long add. It's where you learn all the different things. And, I was blessed to where I had, now, of course, COVID came in 5th grade. I didn't do good, which that is an effect, but it's been 7 years. We can't really blame COVID anymore. What thing I would do is just there needs to be some type of maybe either like it needs to be something that needs to happen in their school where we identify who's behind. And TCAP is a great way, but it has to be something else. I don't know if it's maybe if a teacher notices something and then it's intense, it needs to be something that's intensive because honestly, I don't think it's middle school. I think if they leave elementary school and they don't have the principles that they need to have in order for middle school, it is going to be a very bumpy ride for that pupil. So either it be more RTI 2B squared instruction, whether it be that to where they have dedicated classes to where, it's a lab class. For example, high school, they had it to where they understood the fact that most students come in, they struggle with algebra, they struggle with geometry, they struggle with they struggle with math in 9th grade. So what they did is they took all the 9th graders, whether it didn't matter if you had an outstanding, it didn't matter if you had exceeded or if you had below, it didn't matter. You were going to get in a lab class to where they were going to break down everything about math, about algebra 1. And by the end of it, most people were scoring in that dark green, teal color in TCAP for algebra 1. So just some thoughts on that, and
Chairman Evie?
Yes.
My suggestion is that we really focus on middle schools this year across Tennessee to see is there a variable that we're seeing across all middle schools? And I can give you more information on that probably in November because we lost our stellar principal to go to a middle school that was in trouble this year. She led us to a reward school this past year and she asked to go to this middle school so that she's a fixer. So I'll be tapping into her in November saying, okay, what are you doing? So.
I just want to be on the record saying how excited I am and how excited we are all getting about data right now. I mean, this is the energy that we need to figure out the path forward. I mean, truly. And so I think it's really healthy and good conversation. I also just want to say that this is new data. None of us have had a chance to dig into it yet, but I think the things I hear surfacing, I'm making a lot of notes for our team about the kind of presentations that we'd love to tee up soon, because I do think that cohort data is so important to see. We've been so focused as a state on early grades reading, and we're seeing those payoffs, and that should trickle up. And also, as you mentioned, like the work on adolescent literacy. I mean, I would love to deeply understand that and have communication about that with our board members. I would also love to look and see who's getting the remarkable results in middle school in particular, as we're diving in, as called. But I think, as we all dig into this data, we've got a presentation coming up from Jefferson County on the great work that they're doing in math. I mean, we can look at our district leaders and see in schools and within districts that are getting those outsized results, and really start to learn together about sort of what the work needs to be. But I'm excited that we're so excited, and lots more presentations. Dr. Laird and Mr. Kearney, I hope we'll see you again soon.
Keep on going though.
Yeah, we're not done yet. So yeah.
I would jump in quickly. I'm reminded of a wonderful saying from one of my colleagues, Joe Murphy at Vanderbilt. When he talked about school improvement, and he was a reform scholar, he had this wonderful saying where he said, a goal is a goal, 2 goals is half a goal, and 3 goals is no goals at all. And there's really something important about focus in the context of school improvement. And we've got 149 districts, we've got 1,800 schools, and they don't all need the same thing. And so, we presented ELA, we want to do better at ELA. We're going to present math, we need to do better at math. You're going to see the same thing in science, you're going to see a similar thing in social studies. And even though we are making improvements everywhere, that's not often how we get better, right? Like we focused on early grade literacy and we did amazing things in Tennessee in that space. It's hard to pull all the levers up simultaneously. And of course, that's what we want to do. And we certainly appreciate the push, but we're presenting here a lot of data and we're not going to max this all out simply because it's hard to really get better.
Dr. Morrison.
Sorry, I had one other thought that I'd forgotten to mention, but we were talking earlier about computer science and AI, and I'm reminded of the results that they're getting in Sumner County with this co-developed model of Course Mojo that's really helping middle school teachers in their ELA instruction, individualized for students in real time, the missed concept, and I mean, they saw +8 percentage point in the first year that they deployed that technology with teachers, with Fidelity, and then 0.4 percentage, I think, in their ELA scores the second year. So that's just something to kind of weave throughout the presentations today as we're thinking about where are we ripe for innovation and some potentially technological assists. It's one to watch.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, at the risk of sounding repetitive, the increases in math performance across locale are consistent with what we see in ELA. We've got suburban areas continuing to lead the other locales with a math proficiency rate of 50.6, or just over half of the students testing proficient in that met or exceeded expectations category. Rural, town, and city areas follow behind in that order with math proficiency rates of 43.8 for rural areas, 38.5 for town, and 35.5 for cities. And across all the locale types, despite that those kind of differences, we see that everybody's increasing, and that this increase is coming from declines in the number of students in that below category, that category of students that are at the lowest level in our assessment system, and increases in the top two categories. When we break down the performance by subgroup, again, it's a similar story with math that it is for ELA, where everybody is increasing, both in the last year and since 2021, and even since 2019. But there are still gaps between our overall results and the results for the historically underserved subgroup of students, including the economically disadvantaged, the English learners, and the students with disabilities. And those trends are also reflected in our demographic groups. Everybody has increased in the last year without exception in math. Everyone's increased since 21. Everyone's increased since 2019, but there are gaps between the different subgroups. We did want to zero in, as is a particularly important grade, fourth grade math performance. It was a real bright spot this year. It actually saw the largest gains of any grade. Math proficiency increased by over 3.5 percentage points, from 45.8 in 2025 to almost 50%, 49.5 in the met and exceeded category in 2026. And consistent with the other results, this increase is coming from an evenly distributed decrease in the students in the two levels below proficiency, the below in the orange and approaching in green there, and then increases in both the categories above the proficiency line. Last but not least, as a social studies, former social studies teacher myself, I think it would be remiss if we didn't take a look at the results in social studies for this year. Again, like the other subject areas, social studies performance increased this year. And looking at all grades, so reminder, in social studies, we test in middle school, and then we also have the U.S. History EOC taken in 11th grade. Proficiency across all grades increased by over 2 percentage points, from 47 proficiency to right at 50% for the first time. And this increase in proficiency is across both the exceeded and met expectations categories, and the decreases are in both of the categories below the cut line. So all three of the subjects that where we didn't have standards setting happen prior to this year, all these subjects are increasing. Social studies, same thing as the other subjects. All grade bands are going up. In the middle school social studies TCAP proficiency rates tend to be a little bit higher than the high school U.S. History EOC in 11th grade. But the high school U.S. History EOC is also increasing the fastest. So it's got a ways to catch up to the middle school proficiency rate, but it is also increasing quickly. Both middle school and high school social studies proficiency rates are at the highest they've been since 2021. If we look at social studies performance for the subgroups, again, it's a similar story to math and ELA. Everybody's increased. Everybody's increased in the last year, including the economically disadvantaged, the English learners, and the students with disabilities. Everyone's been on an upward trajectory since 2021, but there are still gaps between the overall results and the results for the historically underserved subgroups. So thank you for letting me share those results with you. I'm going to kick it back to Dr. Laird for concluding remarks.
Well, I think we've gotten into a lot of the points that we really wanted to make. Again, we're just pleased to be able to come back here and at least as far as the year-over-year results have suggested that we've maintained our streak. We love to continue to note the fact that we're seeing this corroborated in other places, whether it's a college entrance exam or NAEP assessments. The improvements that we're seeing on the TCAP, they really do seem to be real. We obviously care deeply about maintaining the standard and being rigorous in our construction and reporting. But it's really nice to see that this is being corroborated in a variety of other places. And these really do feel like a real trend of meaningful improvement. Happy to take any questions.
Thank
we
you,
have
Dr.
now.
Laird. Questions for Dr. Laird? Yes, Ms. Cobb.
When are we going to go back to TCAP testing in social studies in the elementary level? It's history. It needs to be taught.
Yeah.
Needs to be tested.
We heard that during we had a legislative working group on assessments. We have heard that. We made note of it. We do not have any plans in the works to do that. We also know there's a very strong opinion out there that we don't want more testing in Tennessee. And we're continuing to listen. So we will continue to make note of that. We've heard that. We don't have any plans in the works at this time.
Dr. Maxwell.
I just want to thank both our gentlemen here. And I think something very powerful that you reminded all of us of, Dr. Laird, is that for the proficiency for that student, it is that comprehensive and thorough understanding of the standard. And therefore, this is old school, but one of the best principles I ever had. She had us go at the beginning of each year, whatever we taught, and we read our standards. And so our educators, and we've got to support our educators to teach to the depth of those standards in order for that 8-year-old in 3rd grade to have that comprehensive and thorough understanding of the expectation. So I appreciate you reminding me of that.
Very well said, Dr. Maxwell. Other comments or questions? Well, thank you so much. It's critical to have the data because if you don't know where you are, you're not going to know how to get to where you want to get to. And I think we all agree there's more work that we need to do, better understanding of what the data means and what we can do with that data. But thank you for your efforts and just keep on doing it. Just see.
Thank you.
Okay, it's break time. Let's see. Let's break until 2:30.
It's generous. We can.
Or-
It's good.
push the button, the light comes on, you're off.
Okay.
And just
2-minute warning, 2-minute warning. We will continue. Next is Mass Supports Act, Miss Christy Brown, and I think Christy Wall's there too.
I think it's afternoon now, so good afternoon, everyone. Christy Brown, Chief Academic Officer for the Tennessee Department of Education. And I appreciate the team's work on presenting the data, and I share some of the same celebration feelings that you all have in certain areas. And I also share places where we have some challenges and some more work to do. So I want to take just a moment to kind of tee this up, if you will, for Christy Wall, who has a presentation for you all on strengthening mathematics in Tennessee specifically. But I want to take just a minute as a segue between the data that we saw, the math presentations that we're about to see, and say that the gains that we have seen, as you all know, have happened as a result over time, not just one or two things, but a combination of some really strong practices in Tennessee. I would say that policy kind of sets the non-negotiables, right? Like that's the baseline for everyone. When strong policies are set, like the Tennessee Literacy Success Act, the Learning Loss Act. Most recently, we've had the Math Supports Act, which we'll talk a little bit about. And then very recently, guaranteeing access to advanced coursework in Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So we're going to get into that. But again, policy sets that framework, also some non-negotiables, and then followed up with, I think, the second piece that contributes to the ongoing gains and upward trajectory that Tennessee is seeing is around the structures that are consistent, familiar, and predictable to educators in the way that we do things in Tennessee, as far as implementing high-quality instructional materials, that we provide the ongoing supports for teachers and leaders. And then thirdly, I believe that this is truly the strategy, if I had to name one, and it is the implementation. Policy does not cause results or student outcomes to improve on their own, and neither does just funding. It really is making the most of that, making sure that the strong implementation is there of our evidence-based practices that are in place here in Tennessee. That includes our literacy and math networks. So Dr. Wall is going to talk about those in just a second, in math in particular. We have a lot of asynchronous training that's on demand, the teachers can do on their own time, but we also listen to feedback from our districts, and they like the follow-up or the options to do some things in person. And so we're very responsive to district feedback that we have, and I think that that lends itself to the partnerships that we have with our district leaders, our school leaders, and our teachers, that that constant feedback loop that we have in partnership with them, because we want to be responsive to what works for them too. And it's not just about their continuous improvement, but also the continuous improvement that we strive for at the Department of Education as we support those folks out in the field doing the work. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Wall to talk a lot more about strengthening mathematics in Tennessee.
Thank you, Chief Brown. All right, strengthening mathematics in Tennessee. Good afternoon, Chairman Eby and board members, commissioner, and educational colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on Tennessee's statewide mathematics work. As Chief Brown mentioned, over the last several years, Tennessee's made mathematics achievement a strategic priority. We focus not only on what students learn, but also on strengthening the systems that support high-quality mathematics instruction in every district across our state. Today, we'll share the progress we've made, the supports that we've built, the impact we're seeing in student outcomes, and the opportunities that lie ahead as we continue accelerating mathematics achievement for Tennessee students. Mathematics matters because it opens doors. It is one of the strongest predictors of post-secondary success, access to high-demand careers, economic mobility, and participation in STEM-related pathways. We know that students who develop a strong foundation in mathematics are better positioned to thrive in college, careers, and then later in life. At the same time, the pandemic created significant learning disruptions nationwide, and Tennessee was not immune to those challenges. While we've made important progress, achievement gaps remain, and many students still need support to reach grade level expectations, as was just referenced by Dr. Laird and team. The questions guiding our work are simple, but yet very important. How do we ensure every student, regardless of geography or background, has access to excellent mathematics instruction every day? The work that I described today and that's included in this presentation is geared towards answering that particular question. The chart tells an important story that we're looking at. Prior to the pandemic, statewide mathematics proficiency was at 37%. During the pandemic, the figure declined sharply to 25%. Since that time, Tennessee has experienced 5 consecutive years in increase in achievement. Proficiency increased from 25% in 21 to 41% in 2026. That represents a 16 percentage point increase over 5 years that reflects the highest mathematics proficiency level that Tennessee has achieved thus far. This growth demonstrates that recovery is possible when strong instructional systems, educator support, and consistent implementation work together. While we celebrate this progress, we also clearly recognize that there is more work that lies ahead of us. Our focus remains on ensuring that every student reaches proficiency and experiences success in mathematics. Our vision for this work is quite clear. Every Tennessee student develops the mathematical understanding, problem-solving skills, and confidence necessary for future success. That vision is supported by 5 core priorities. First, ensuring access to high-quality instructional materials. Second, strengthening Tier 1 instruction in every classroom. Third, providing effective student supports and acceleration opportunities. Fourth, building educator expertise through professional learning and leadership supports. And finally, ensuring access to rigorous mathematics experiences for all students. Every statewide effort we undertake is aligned to one or more of these priorities. As we look at the progress that we're seeing today as a result of intentional work that's been put in over years. In 2021, the State Board adopted Tennessee's current mathematics standards. In 22 and 23, districts adopted, across the state adopted high-quality instructional materials. The department provided implementation support grants, released revised instructional focus documents, and aligned assessments to those standards. In 2024, the department launched the Math Implementation Network, which we'll learn a bit more about. In 2025, the department, and this year, 2026, the Student Math Acceleration and Access Act will create additional opportunities for students to access advanced mathematics pathways. Viewed together, these milestones represent coherent strategy focused on standards, materials, instruction, educator support, and student opportunity. Our support system is designed to strengthen mathematics outcomes at every single level. For districts and leaders, we provide strategic planning support, implementation guidance, data analysis, and collaborative learning opportunities. For educators, we provide professional learning, mathematics-specific guidance, instructional resources, and regional support structures. For students, we support tutoring and intervention work, summer learning, acceleration opportunities, and advanced coursework access. This work reflects a very core and fundamental belief. Student outcomes improve when the entire system improves. Our goal is to create alignment between state support, district leadership, educator practice, and student experience. This slide should look a bit familiar as previously offered to you all, but just a little bit more in detail to focus in on the mathematics TCAP achievement that's captured over time. The most clear measure of impact is, in fact, student performance. Since 2021, mathematics proficiency has increased from 25 to 41% statewide, as we've mentioned. The percentage of students exceeding expectations has more than doubled during that same period, increasing from 6% to 13%. Equally as important, the percentage of students scoring below expectations has decreased from 44% to 24%. These gains indicate improvement across multiple performance levels as measured by our TCAP. We are seeing more students reach proficiency, more students excelling, and fewer students perform significantly below grade level. These results demonstrate that sustained implementation and educator support are translating into stronger outcomes for students over time. To zoom out just a bit, but still remain in the sphere of data and evidence of impact, our progress is also being reflected not only in state data, which Dr. Laird mentioned previously in reference to NAEP specifically. It's also being recognized nationally. According to the education scorecard that was recently released and is cited in this deck, I encourage you, it's hyperlinked if you've not looked at Tennessee's profile and report. It's quite impressive. I encourage you to further explore that as time allows. But according to the scorecard release, Tennessee ranks second amongst participating states in mathematics growth and fourth in reading growth. This type of external validation is important because it confirms that Tennessee's results are not isolated to a single data measurement. Our state and national data are telling the same story. Students are making gains, and instructional improvement efforts are producing measurable results. One of the most important lessons we've learned is that high-quality instructional materials create a foundation for statewide coherence. We've learned this lesson time over time as it refers and relates to different content areas and subject areas in their cycle of standards adoption and then making it be time for materials adoption and implementation. When educators share strong instructional resources aligned to standards, support becomes more effective and also becomes more scalable. This in turn allows professional learning to become very targeted and specialized and specific. Coaching of the teachers and the use of their materials becomes more intentional and focused. District collaboration becomes richer. Implementation guidance becomes more actionable. High-quality instructional materials are not the entire strategy, but they are the foundation that allows every other support to work more efficiently and more effectively. So in saying that, let's take a bit of a preview look at our statewide supports and specifically what the department is offering to districts. Our support model focuses on district level leadership as well as building level leaders and educators. Districts frequently receive opportunities for collaboration, technical assistance, and network and collaborative learning. Leadership teams receive implementation guidance, planning resources and tools, along with their own professional development to increase instructional leadership capacity. Educators receive professional development and classroom resources that strengthen daily instructional practices. By connecting these supports, we create a system that is both responsive and sustaining. To look specifically about one support that's been mentioned in detail, the department offers districts a math implementation network. We are in year 3 of the math implementation network work, and it's actually become one of our strongest supports that's offered out to districts. Participating districts are able to engage in regional convenings in their locale, virtual learning sessions as they're scheduled and available, and asynchronous learning opportunities along with classroom supports. You can see the list that is geared towards district leaders up on the slide deck. Last year, 87% of Tennessee districts participated in at least one of these learning activities that is geared towards supporting mathematics. Nearly half of districts engaged deeply throughout the year, meaning that they accessed multiple learning and professional development opportunities at the leadership level. Most importantly, districts with deep participation experienced an average of 2 percentage point increases in their math performance from 2025 to 2026. That finding reinforces an important principle: sustained engagement drives improvement. As a part of the math implementation network, we also have a system set up where learning walks are conducted. We have a district in each region that typically engages our team along with our core consultants that support in the area, go together and do side-by-side learning walks and classroom observations. These districts receive quarterly support focused on vision setting, classroom observations, utilizing the IPG or instructional practice guide for mathematics, also benefiting from collaborative data analysis and action planning as a result of participating in these co-led learning walks. The purpose of these visits is absolutely not evaluational. It is simply to build capacity and better understand what's happening in classrooms during daily instruction. We want district leaders to develop a shared understanding of effective mathematics instruction and the ability to support that instruction consistently across schools. I'm very hopeful and excited about the next presentation following me because you will see a very strong example of this type of partnership in action and some of the work that the specific district that we'll share out will be sharing with you.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Go back one slide. I'm a little confused. Districts that were deeply engaged got an average of 2 percentage point increase in their math performance. Yet the chart that you showed before, that the whole state got a 4% increase. So the ones that had the better performance only got half the increase? I don't think that's right.
Well, that's a great question, Chairman. So the particular districts that have engaged deeply were measured, from their starting point last year in 2025 for math performance to their ending point in 2026. And so while the average of those districts combined was 2 percentage point increases, the average that we looked at previously was statewide and everybody else averaged together.
Yeah, so and maybe somebody can help me. Statewide, we got a 4% increase. You had districts that focused in and went through this program, and they averaged a 2% increase. So the districts that obviously didn't participate in it must have averaged about a 6% increase. The 6 and 2 out of a 2 is 4. I mean, what am I missing?
Yes, there is a difference in the averages, and I would love to follow up with you with those exact calculations just to make sure that we're clear. I understand the articulation that you're making between the difference in achievement increase.
I'd like
and would
that. I think what you're putting together makes a lot of sense, but your numbers just don't don't match with it or something like that. So.
Yes, I understand the point. Yes. And I'll be happy to follow up with you with those particular districts and their starting and endpoints and talk through the averaging and
All right.
weights that were
Thank you.
applied. Thank you for that question and comment. So with the particular learning walk impact for these specific districts, the impact has been powerful with these partnerships, and I want to share just a few examples. Hancock County increased 5th grade proficiency by more than 26 percentage points. 2 specific schools in Clarksville, Montgomery have experienced 4th grade gains of 6 and 13 percentage point gains, respectively. Trenton Special School District has experienced some of the state's largest mathematic gains and is also referenced and included in the state's education recovery report card. And beyond the numbers, district leaders are consistently reporting stronger instructional alignment, more clear expectations, and more effective collaboration amongst teachers and instructional coaches, as well as their administrators. Those system level improvements are critical in order to sustain long-term success. To also speak to a bit of our system support and district opportunities, I do want to make sure that we give some time and space to reference our core academic consultants in the mathematics space. We have a core consultant that is specifically supporting mathematics across the state in each of the 8 regions, and their work is invaluable to this work as well. So I want to be clear about our connectivity and coherence across math support being provided to districts. Their role, the academic consultant's role, is helping districts individualize their support needed and use of evidence from classrooms to determine where to focus and how to strengthen their systems over time. As mentioned, our core consultants and their partnerships provide a deeper layer of individualized support for districts. This past year, 52 districts engaged in strategic coaching partnerships, while an additional 40 districts participated in regional collaborative opportunities that our core consultants provided. Across nearly 1,000 classroom walkthroughs, 96% of observed lessons demonstrated access to on-grade level mathematics content. That matters deeply because access to grade level instruction is one of the most strongest indicators of meaningful learning for students and in preparation for end of year testing. Instruction that's aligned to standards assists when it's time to assess the alignment of standards and instruction. So when we examine TCAP outcomes amongst core supported districts, we found across each grade band the following. Grades 3 through 5 who receive support by core math consultants increased by roughly 1.8 percentage points. Grades 6 through 8 increased by 1.4 percentage points, and grades 9 through 12 experienced the largest increase, as we saw in the overall trends and bar graph data, of 2.1 percentage points in just 1 year. What's particularly encouraging is the consistency of growth across system. With a district that we wanted to bring as a spotlight, in addition to the one that we're about to hear from, Lakeland School System provides a strong example of what effective implementation looks like. Rather than viewing various instructional resources as separate initiatives, they intentionally align the instructional focus documents, the instructional practice guide, and high-quality instructional materials. The result was greater coherence amongst their planning, instruction, observation, and feedback systems in their district. And you can see some quotes up here, as well as the state level tools that have been provided. Lakeland has done a really nice job to take the benefits of the math network and then also really leverage their core consultant in their region to customize some individual support and prioritize what they're choosing to work on. So you can see on the left the resources and tools that the state's providing, but then also the ways in which they're applying those in their system has been done really, really nicely. So definitely wanted to make sure that that was a highlight that was elevated to you all for awareness. Another aspect of educator support that has been provided has been our summer training. We have launched a large-scale training initiative that started with asynchronous training online for both elementary math teachers as well as middle grades math teachers. This summer, that online learning went out into the field, and we were able to hire 40 regional math experts from each region covering the state through a competitive application process. Those facilitators represented 25 different school districts and 3 different education preparation providers. In turn, over the summer, these contracted facilitators who are math experts in their region were able to train and reach over 700 educators this summer that went through either the elementary math training track or the middle grades math training track. They spent several days together in their regions and went through math training that applied both new research and evidence-based best practices in accompaniment with their high-quality instructional materials, and gave teachers some really meaningful tools to take back into the classroom. As you can see, their overall satisfaction rating of the training was a 9.6 out of 10 points for their feedback back to the department, which was very affirming to hear that the training content really met the need of what teachers were seeking from accessing this training opportunity. Out of those 700 educators that were present over the summer and spread across our state working with these facilitators, 90 of our districts had representation in the trainings, which included charter schools, private schools, and then 3 of our educator prep programs. You can see some pictures here of really the professional development coming to life. We've also included some participant feedback. This is one example of several that really saying some pretty high regards to this training that was offered this summer, and just the opportunity to come together as a math community and be with their peers over the summer to really hone in on their practices. We will continue to use educator feedback to shape future statewide initiatives. It's critically important to our team at the department to hear directly from educators. Addressing needs and understanding statewide trends and the data that's present is really critical to our work and ensuring that we partner well with our districts and support accordingly. Our goal, again, is sustained improvement that reaches every single student. So in saying that, we have several opportunities and next steps, as was mentioned in the presentation before. But just to reiterate a couple of things that we are prioritizing and setting focus on in the upcoming year, one of which Chief Brown has already mentioned is critically important to getting right this year, is increasing student access to advanced mathematics opportunities, particularly bringing Algebra 1 course access into the middle grade space. We'll continue responding to district feedback and statewide data to ensure our supports meet the evolving needs, but that is one critical component that we are heavily focused on, and ensuring that we communicate and start to collaborate and work efficiently on before those courses are made available to students next school year. Our work closely aligns with the Student Math Acceleration and Access Act, as well as the K-8 Math Support Act, and we will continue to expand opportunities where needed to further support math. A couple of key takeaways that I'd like to make sure that I leave you all with, and then happy to open this up for questions and any further commentary. But mathematics achievement is improving through intentional statewide support. Educators remain the strongest driver of student success. Strategic investments are creating positive outcomes for students. Continued partnerships with state board, with district leaders, with superintendents and educators, along with communities, is critical for this work. As I wrap up and begin to conclude, we're going to hone in on 3 key messages. First, implementation support matters. Strong academic standards and materials create opportunity, but results from effective implementation, and implementation simply takes time. Second, relationships matter. Meaningful partnerships between state, district, school, and educators help accelerate improvement, and we know this to be true. Third, capacity also matters. Sustainable gains occur when we invest in educator expertise, focus on leadership development, and continuous learning. The progress that we are seeing in Tennessee mathematics is a result of those three factors working together and in accompaniment with one another. We are proud of the progress made, grateful for the partnership of districts and educators across the state, and committed to continuing the work on behalf of Tennessee students. I would also be remiss not to take a moment to specifically thank our math supporting team and the leadership at our Department of Education. We have a very connected group of individuals working on specific mathematics supports with our district leaders and with their corresponding systems. And so without those engagements and shared ownership in the work, it simply wouldn't be possible. So with that, I'm happy to take questions and open up for any further discussion. Thank you, Chairman Eby.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Wall. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Questions or comments?
I do have
Mr.
one
Jensen.
question. The teachers, when they're doing that summer training, are they paid during that period or are they doing that voluntarily?
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. That's a great question. The facilitators that are leading the training are in fact paid. The participants, the educators that are coming, are not compensated for their time financially. However, they do get professional development credit that can be applied to their requirements to meet professional development hours during the course of the upcoming school year.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. It does look like you're doing a lot of really good things, and I think they are paying dividends. I'd recommend you go back and look at your numbers. Like Lakeland was 2 plus 2.45. Again, that just doesn't jive with 4. So that would be helpful to understand, but great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Next item is early math interventions. Oh, did you have a question?
Well, first of all, we would like to thank the board for taking the time to hear from us today. And we greatly appreciate the honor it is to be here. My name is Christy Walke. I'm the elementary supervisor for Jefferson County Schools. And I have with me today Laura McClellan, who is the instructional coach at Mount Horeb Elementary School. And Laura also works as an instructional coach with our kindergarten teachers across our school district. And I have Bailey Walker. Bailey is a kindergarten teacher at Talbot Elementary School. And Bailey is the teacher leader for our district kindergarten teachers. We'll share a few demographics about Jefferson County and Jefferson County schools. So Jefferson County Schools has approximately 6,800 students across the district. We're located in East Tennessee. We have a median family income for families in Jefferson County of $66,114 a year, which is about 5% less than the state's median income for families. The makeup of our school district, is we have 6 elementary schools, we have 2 pre-K through 8 schools, 2 middle schools, 1 virtual academy, and 1 high school. Our high school's mascot is the Patriots, and we unite under that red, white, and blue. Earlier, you saw some mathematics TCAP data. We also have our particular district TCAP data to share with you for third, fourth, and fifth grade over the years since 2019. A couple of points I want to make about this data. If you look at 2026 numbers, you'll see that in third, fourth, and fifth grade, we were higher than the state average in all three grade levels. The highlighted number represents the highest that our district has been in proficiency over the 8-year cycle. So in fourth and fifth grade math, we had our highest results this past year in 2026. And in third grade math, we had our second highest result with 46% proficiency. And the year before, we had our highest result with 47.3% proficiency. I would also like to point out our pre-COVID numbers. So in 2019, our district was scoring proficiency numbers in the 30s. And now in 2026, we find ourselves in the 40s and 50s with proficiency. One more highlight for Jefferson County Schools. In 2025, we were named one of the high-performing school districts across the state because half or more of our schools made an A on the state report card. So we're very proud of that. Our results can't just happen in third through eighth grade math without a strong foundation in kindergarten, first, and second grade math. And while we don't have TCAP data, we do have data from our HQIM and from the assessments that our students take within their curriculum, diagnostic assessments. So on the screen, this is May 2026 data for our kindergarten, first, and second grade teachers and students. If you look at the key on the side, you'll see that the green represents mid or above grade level. The light green represents early on grade level. The yellow represents 1 grade level below, and the light red represents 2 or more grade levels below. The fourth bar graph under kindergarten shows you Jefferson County's district scores. And you'll also see under the word district, the 450, that number represents our kindergarten students. Beside of the district score, you see TN, YTD, or Tennessee year to date. So the other districts in Tennessee, the other kindergarten students that took this same assessment, that have the same HQIM, are represented in that number with 32,000 kindergartners in Tennessee. And then the national year to date would be the national students that also participate in the program and take the same assessment, the 828,000 students. What we would like to point out, of course, is that we have more green than Tennessee year to date, the national year to date, and the national norm, with 61% of our students scoring mid or above grade level, an additional 18% that are on grade level. If you take that same look and apply it to first grade, you'll see that we have 46% of our students in first grade that are mid or above grade level, and that is also outperforming Tennessee, the nation, and the national norm. And in second grade, you'll see some red scores that start to appear. This begins the first opportunity for a level of gap to occur. I would say that our 10% in red is stronger than across Tennessee with the 14 and the 13 that you see for the nation. And also our second grade students with 32% at mid or above grade level represent another strong, favorable score.
Question.
Okay.
I'll ask you the same question I've asked the others. So as you matriculate here from K1 and 2, your percentage exceeding and meeting is dropping. What's your assessment of why that is happening?
Well, I would say that we usually look at this because we've looked at the same problem. And what I've had to balance out is the fact that it drops for everyone. And so if we have a less of a drop, I am thinking, hey, we're doing good comparatively. One thing in kindergarten I will say is that you know, there are not as many grade levels to be behind, so we don't see the red numbers. I think that as the standards progress, we do have difficulty maintaining everyone on a mid or above grade level. It gets harder year after year.
Maybe what we ought to do is look at making that kindergarten a little harder, set the standards at the beginning a little harder. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not an educator, but it's interesting data to look at to
Yeah.
try to understand why. And I suspect as we go on up, it's going to be the same thing throughout. I haven't seen the data, but
Yeah. I'll think about your question too, and I'll see if by the time I finish today, if I've got any other thoughts to add, I will let you know. Okay. I'm having a little trouble.
Josh.
Oh, there we
Got
go.
it. Every time I say his name, it works.
You got it. Thank you. We'll make that our sign, our signal. So we are here to share some of the elementary math supports that we have put in place that we think have contributed to these strong outcomes. Some of these that we're going to talk about are collaborative planning, our teacher leader initiative, our utilization of data. We're going to talk about our Ready for Kindergarten project that we've done in our district, and then we're going to end with some quick shout outs. So in Jefferson County Schools, we implemented virtual collaborative planning in our elementary schools, wherein our teachers meet 5 to 7 times across the school year in virtual meetings. The work that happens in these meetings are our teachers work together to prepare lessons and anticipate students' needs, to share ideas. We definitely anchor in specific data that is for the recent curriculum assessments that our students may have taken. Some of the factors that led us to launch this structure are that we are a rural school district, and for teachers to have that collaboration, we decided to rather than provide subs and pull teachers from classrooms, that we could try this structure. And the structure was also needed in our school district because in upper ELA or upper elementary, the majority of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers have no one to collaborate with in the building that teaches their exact same standards and curriculum. So we wanted to connect them with each other so that they were working within the same HQIM, the same lessons and material. So also coming out of COVID, we discovered that we knew how to do virtual meetings. So it was a strength of ours at the time, and so we took advantage of that strength. And finally, what led us to begin virtual collaborative planning was John Hattie's work from Visible Learning, where he researched the effect size of factors and influences on student outcomes. He researched over 320 factors and found that the #1 effect size is collective efficacy. And for us, that means collaboration with the belief that the work we're doing will make a difference for students. So we wanted to provide a structure for that to happen for our teachers across the district. In our collaborative planning sessions, we also are solutions oriented and we work on solving problems. I'm not sure if this video is going to play, but I think that was the work that Josh did to get it started for us. We have a clip it's less than 3 minutes long, and it's of a kindergarten math collaborative planning session. And it's also of a 4th grade math collaborative session. Some things I'd like for you to listen for in the teacher's discussion. You'll hear teachers talking about annotating their lesson plans. You're going to hear them talk about the math vocabulary at their grade level, using manipulatives with students. You'll see an agenda on the screen and the teachers off to the side at one point. You'll hear them talk about using exit tickets at the end of class to plan for small group rotations and remediation. In the 4th grade lesson, You'll hear them talk about the instructional focus documents as they dive into standards. They talk about how one math standard could be assessed by an equation or an expression, a rectangular array, or an area model. So they're doing very good work. I might need Josh's
Looking
help.
at numerals, looking at those numbers and being able to understand what those numbers mean, and then be able to use that vocabulary of equal to, greater than, or less than. So you'll kind of see that as we've thought through this lesson, and I say we, it's, you know, our kindergarten teachers have done an amazing job of planning this lesson and annotating it.
This is back to Dandridge's question about the one-to-one match. You could slide them as you count, which is, to Denise's point, the act of fine motor of manipulating something and doing an action along with the one-to-one match. Great suggestion. Thank you for putting that in the chat. So now Jennifer's looking for a couple of people. Have you called on someone, Jennifer?
Yes, Bailey.
Perfect.
And
Bailey.
Newmarket, or Talbot, excuse me, Talbot.
So we talked about, well, manipulatives, that's definitely a must have. And then Tiffany's got her ice cream cones that she's excited.
They love these ice cream cones, and they're different colors, and they can scoop them and pull them off. So that also helps when you get to a certain number, you're stopping there because they're actually putting it on, and then they have to stop. So that can help slow down kids too that are going past that number and not stopping.
And then Tiffany was talking too about the exit ticket and using that as kind of an assessment, a way to kind of decide about small groups, because we know that was one of the ways that we talked about helping with misconceptions. So kind of using that exit ticket as a way to help decide what support students need in those small groups.
The IFD, it said using equations, rectangular arrays, area models.
And I will give you a heads up on lesson 14 quiz. I think I have it right here somewhere. You will have this question right here on the lesson 14 quiz. So that's like the array where they're separated in equal groups. And then you'll also have that area model problem on lesson 15. So that's area model. And then I think this one was, I put on lesson 14 quiz. And this is what the equation would look like. So that's the different types of, models.
Another initiative that we're proud of and we think has impacted our scores is our Teacher Leader Initiative. We have been blessed in Jefferson County Schools to have instructional coaches like Laura in our schools for years, and they do amazing work. I feel like they are the backbone of our instructional programming in our elementary schools. There's a long list of things that our instructional coaches do, but they support both ELA, math, and science. And they work on our universal reading screener, ILPDs. They work on running an intervention program, matching students to intervention. They schedule all of our tutors. They especially coach our new teachers and teachers that are in the most need of support within our district. But looking at our programming, we decided to layer on a Teacher Leader Initiative to our instructional coaches because several reasons once again, but one of the reasons is we have experts among us. So many of our teachers are very good at their craft. They have an environment in the classroom where students are extremely successful and they bring great scores year after year. They've figured things out. And as an observer, an administrator, when I go into those classrooms, when our principals go into those classrooms, we struggle to say, this is a refinement or a next step for these teachers. And often we find ourselves saying, we want you to share. We want you to help someone else. And also knowing that teachers respect and trust other teachers, that practices that they are talking about are classroom proven, and those teachers are still in the classroom, passionate with their work with their students. Many of those teachers don't want to leave the classroom for a promotion. They are very happy working with students and passionate about that position, but they are still willing to step out of that role and help the district as a whole. So I do think that picking the right teacher leader is crucial. Not only does a teacher need to be successful in her classroom, but have the right kind of relationship building and ability to work with others. And also, like Bailey here, who came with me today, be willing to take a risk or a challenge on. One more point before I let Bailey speak about being a teacher leader is we also feel like it is a way to use our money wisely. Our professional development money, we do send people to conferences and we do get results, but having our in-house investing in our own teachers and in the specific HQIM and lessons and our students that the teacher leaders are knowledgeable about, we felt like is a wise investment with our money. I would also add one more point. Developing a partnership, our instructional coaches and our teacher leaders really work together to plan professional development, to think through resources and teacher needs so that they're able to really get down into the work and make strong decisions about professional learning for our teachers.
So I'd love to talk to you all about being a teacher leader. So being a teacher leader has provided an opportunity for me to deepen my understanding, to model math lessons for teachers, build relationships with other kindergarten teachers across the district and other teacher leaders and instructional coaches across our district, and also to become a voice in our district. Laura is my kindergarten instructional coach, and so her and I work very closely together. She has helped me to deepen my understanding of the curriculum, the data that we see, and she has challenged me and asked me some really great hard questions that have made me kind of dig into why do we do the things that we do in the classroom? Why do we want to replicate these things? What are we doing that we want to replicate? And so that's been a really great partnership. We're able to kind of get down to the granular level and talk to each other and say, how do we make this look and how do we do this to help teachers in our district? I was able to model a math lesson. So that's a picture of me teaching a kindergarten math lesson to my other kindergarten teachers in the district. That immersive lesson experience was something that I was able to go through previously to before doing that. So then I was able to turn around and share that with our district teachers. And I modeled, effective strategies such as selected sequencing, questioning, wait time, all important things that we know show great benefit in the classroom. And as I've not been able to be a part of the walkthroughs, but I have heard that across the district, and not just in kindergarten, but in other grade levels where teacher leaders have modeled lessons, they are seeing these strategies being implemented in the classrooms from those lessons. I've also had the opportunity to build relationships with the teachers. I've become a touch point for other kindergarten teachers in the district. I get emails, I'll get texts. Hey, how are you doing this? How are you doing this lesson? How did you model this? And I believe that's a really great personal thing. And I believe when we support teachers, that's always the right thing. And so I'm glad to do that in that role. I've had multiple schools send teachers to my classroom to be there for the day and to see how my day flows and to see how we transition from one activity to the next, or how we do different things, the procedures, the strategies that I'm using in real time. And again, I've heard feedback from our district that is again being turned around and implemented into classrooms. And I believe another really important piece of the teacher leader initiative that we have in Jefferson County is that it's given a voice to our teachers. And not only has it given a voice to our teachers, but our district has responded to those voices. And our district leaders are asking us questions and hearing things and working with us closely. And I truly believe that that partnership is as strong as it's ever been. And we are seeing incredible results from that stronger relationship. Thank you.
Another strength that we feel like we have developed over the last few years, and one of our leaders in this is Trevor Collins, who is a district supervisor that I work closely with, but it's our data utilization. We have a protocol we've put in place that we call student achievement planners. And we start the year with all of our students and we write them down in a certain way on a pink sheet. And then as we take assessments across the year, we update information with highlighting and adding numbers. We have a whole system, a protocol that we go through. And this works helps us to target like who needs support and in what way do they need support. Then the step in our process is, okay, let's develop a plan. When are you going to find time to work with this small group? And then what are you going to utilize to reteach or to work on an intervention with this small group? So we help our teachers, listen to them as they make those plans. And that has just become a part of the work that we do. And we feel like arguably that's the most impactful work that we have implemented to help our students gain those successes. We definitely also, I would say, have grown in our capacity to use data. Our teachers seek it out. As soon as we give assessments, they are looking for results. They're going to they're going to race to the instructional coach's door, to the door of the principal. They're going to be texting or calling me, or especially Trevor Collins, to talk about their data and to be proud of what they see, but also work on what are my next steps with what I have revealed, what's been revealed in the data. One special project that we are very excited to share about is our Ready for Kindergarten kits. And Laura is going to talk to us about that.
It's long been my belief that early intervention is, in fact, the best intervention we can provide. And I'm super fortunate to have a principal, Dr. Samuel Hollingshead, that shares that belief. Last fall, we got a small donation from an individual, and Dr. H came to me and he said, "What should we do?" And I said, "Well, I've got this great idea. We should send home success kits for our kindergartners, and we'll send them home at open house." And he said, "Great, what's going in them?" And I said, "Give me a minute." So I really spent a lot of time thinking about what would be best to send home. I spent time thinking about how every now and then I'll hear a parent say, "I want to help my child at home, but I'm not sure how. I'm not sure what to do next. Can you send me something?" And I thought about how every now and then I'll hear a teacher say, "I want parents to help at home, but I'm not sure what to send home for math." They're intimidated by the math, or it's this, connotation that we're using new math. So that kind of rolled around in the back of my mind. My background is early literacy. So I spent time with the kindergarten teacher in my building, Samantha Taylor, and we talked through several different resources that could enhance fine motor, literacy, and numeracy. And I was adamant that these materials had to be simple, easy for families to use, no technology required, that they could be fun, engaging, that they would be play-like, game-like for families. So we came up with this kit, and I'll let you read the list on the next slide of what's in there. I was also adamant that anything that we included, particularly related to mathematics, was what children will see in the curriculum. So this is a kit that's intended, yes, to help children get ready for school, but it's also intended to help them throughout the kindergarten year. So there are tools in there that children will see in their kindergarten classroom. So we gave the kits out at open house last fall. It was a big hit. Parents loved it. We got great feedback on our survey. They loved the kits. Christy heard about our kids. She came, talked to Samantha and I. We shared what we had done, what was in the kids, and she so generously decided to replicate it across the district at Kindergarten Roundup, which was held this spring. So every child got a kit ahead of kindergarten. But before that day, I said, Christy, you know, the thing that this project is missing a companion piece where we have little YouTube videos. They're super short, 1 minute, that shows parents how to use these materials, not some outside material, some 3-minute video, but these materials in practice. So Christy ran with that idea, and Bailey and Samantha, the teacher I keep referencing, it was a blast. It was one of those really fun projects. You know, we sat for the day and they just did first take very often and created a video library of about 18 videos that go along with this kit. There's a QR code that families can scan and get access to these videos. Chrissy's about to play a video. Before she does, when we have professional development with kindergarten teachers at the beginning of the year, we also looked again at these videos so they would kind of be in everybody's mind. They're always accessible. Many of the materials in this kit are easy to reproduce. They're very cheap. We can send them home again and again and again. So we made very basic template of when each of these things would be taught across the kindergarten year. We wrote a quick note to families that could be easily copied into like a reminder dojo platform to communicate with parents. So the hope is that this would be something that parents and families revisit time after time after time, and that kids would get interested when they see the things come up in their classroom. They'll say, oh yeah, I've got that at home. I can go home and play that game with my family or play school with my stuffed animals. So I'll let you watch this video.
The game you can play with the tools in your toolkit is count and smash. So we have Play-Doh balls here that we've rolled out, and what you can do is call out a number. So I'll call out the number 3, and we'll set out 3 Play-Doh balls. And then we'll count, and as we count, we're going to smash them. This helps with one-to-one counting and making sure that the object that we're counting is the object that we're smashing. So let's do this together. 1, 2, 3. Another way that you can play this game is by writing a number on the whiteboard. So I'm going to I'm going to write a number here, and Samantha's going to put out that many Play-Doh balls. All right, so I'll show her the number, and then she'll put out that many Play-Doh balls. 2, 3, 4, and then together we'll count those as she smashes. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can also use your tens frame, which is found in your toolkit, to help organize as you get into bigger numbers as well.
Like I said, we are extremely proud of this project and the work that has been done to pull it together from our team. And we plan to continue this annually.
Thank you. We want to end on a couple of quick shout outs. First, to the Math Implementation Network that you heard about from Christy Wall. We have been one of those high participating districts. We take something away from almost every session that we have attended. And 2 of the big takeaways that you even heard about in the presentation today were the modeled lesson or the immersive experience that came from the network that we replicated with our teacher leaders. And secondly, the collaborative prep time, which was the agenda that you saw on the collaborative planning. That network helped us to develop. They showed us that agenda, and it was very appropriate because it was practical. It was 30 minutes, a 30-minute agenda that we could tackle within our structure. Also, a quick shout out to Rebecca Pettit. This also connects to Christy Wall's presentation. She is one of our 3rd grade teachers, and she is a 3rd grade math teacher leader for our school district. And this summer, she worked as an early grades math trainer. She also had nearly perfect ratings from all her participants. And I chose a quote from the participants to include today. The conversations that were facilitated during this training were very valuable. I learned a lot about the progression of learning across grade levels and how to make sense of the content by facilitating concrete experiences for students. After this training, I had teachers reach out and ask for a particular resource. They said, we have to have fraction towers.
And they explained what fraction towers, how they could be utilized. And so that's something that I worked to provide for them and got them, they were delivered last week, I believe. Also, a quick shout out to everyone back home. As I said in the beginning, we are united under the Patriot Way. From our amazing director of schools, Dr. Tommy Arnold, to our hardworking students. Our district is functioning at a high level. It takes structures, reflection, planning, listening, hard work, and it definitely takes a team. Thank you to the students, teachers, teacher leaders, instructional coaches, administrators, district supervisors, and Dr. Arnold for the good work happening in Jefferson County Schools. And we'll take any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. Questions? Yes, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where was this when I was in school? I was in kindergarten. I'm sorry. That is textbook, like what what parents and what students and what I think like needs to be in lower grades. That bag right there, I think that's one of the most, I've never thought of that. That's one of the most amazing ideas that I've heard in like a long time when it comes to the kindergarten, the first grade, the second grade. So I see why you're very high achievers in math. You know, you put forth the effort, and again, great presentation and just great effort around, and yeah, keep on doing it. I just love that. I have no words. I love it. It's perfect. Yeah, I do.
Miss McIntyre.
I mean, I'm already sending a text to my interventionists and kindergarten teachers about these kids. But are you like the YouTube videos, are those public?
We developed a playlist, so you access it with a link. So if you just Google search it, you can't get to it. But if you reach out, we can share
I
it.
would love it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, Ms. Cobb.
I feel like I'm experiencing deja vu here because this is exactly how our school operates on our grade level meetings and our presentations and everything. But I love the Patriot name. You know, I'm all about patriotism. It's an excellent presentation, especially the success for kindergarten kids. So many parents in our area, our low socioeconomic area, they want to help, but they just don't know how.
Right.
So I think you've really hit the jackpot there on that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yeah, I too will say outstanding presentation. I really like the lessons learned that you get from your teacher leaders, how you do it and how you transfer that to other teachers and to other schools. That's what's so important. And I know your superintendent, Dr. Arnold, and I will tell him how amazed and how much we appreciated your presentation. Thank you. Okay, next is Licensure Discipline, Todd Madison and team. Alex and Ryan and Jamie.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. Todd Madison, Deputy General Counsel for the board. I, along with my colleagues here, will be presenting the staff recommendations for license discipline at tomorrow's meeting. At this point, we would like to take any clarifying questions or pull any items for further discussion.
Any comments or questions for the team on licensure discipline? I guess that's it. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, see you then.
Okay, final discussion and adjournment. I'll first ask Commissioner, do you have any comments that you want to make or anything? Dr. Gentile?
Not today, no.
Okay. Dr. Morrison?
I always feel like I'm kind of brain dead at the end of one of these sessions, but it's because it's been so good and so much data-rich conversation. I'm enthused. Even missing a few members, we were so engaged and really digging into some excellent presentations from your team, those that came in from Jefferson County. But yeah, it was a good afternoon, and we'll look forward to another busy day tomorrow.
I totally agree. Sometimes, you know, we may ask hard questions, but that's just because we want to provide support and help, and we can get you all thinking in the right direction, and we've done our job. I do believe that all the presentations today were very, very helpful to each one of us, and I thank each one for that. So with the purposes of the committee, the whole being fulfilled, I declare it and the board meeting adjourned.
All right, that's a wrap. See you in the morning. It's really good. I mean, they're like data heavy.